Good day and welcome to everyone. Say good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all of you who have logged on at this point to our Regional Radio Communications Seminar for the Americas, the ITU Regional Radio Communications Seminar for the Americas, which is being hosted by the Caribbean Telecommunications Union here on Zoom webinars. I am Nigel Casimir, the telecommunications specialist at the Caribbean Telecommunications Union. And before we get started, I want to share a few tips so that we can participate successfully. We ask that whenever you log on, in particular, well, the next time you log into this webinar, which will run for the rest of the week as well, we ask that you sign in with your information in this order: your first name, your last name, your organization, and the country where you're based. So, for example, in my case, I have signed in as Nigel Casimir, CTU, TT, which are abbreviations for Caribbean Telecommunications Union and Trinidad and Tobago, which is where I am based. You can use the two-letter code abbreviation for your country as applies for the country code top-level domains. This is necessary because it will make it easy for us to identify you for entry to the seminar and for posing questions and for any interventions which might be possible. During the presentations, we ask that you post your questions in the Q&A box in order for them to be seen and efficiently addressed. The way you access the Q&A box is by clicking the Q&A button located at the bottom of your Zoom window. And using the Q&A is especially important for our seminar because there are hundreds of persons registered and we typically have over 200 persons online at any one time. So there would be limited opportunities for verbal interventions, and it would be a little logistically challenging to facilitate them, so it'll be very limited. Use the chat button for sharing general comments and information with panelists and or all attendees. The chat button is also to be found at the bottom of the Zoom window. The default setting for chat is to all panelists only. So be sure to select your desired recipients when entering your comments into the chat box. So if you want to send it to all panelists and attendees, you need to pick that option from the drop-down menu in the chat box. The seminar presentation slides are and would be posted on the event webpage on the ITU website. And as I said earlier, this seminar would continue until Friday of this week. The presentations from previous days and from today, when they'll be updated and posted on the website. Most of them are there right now. And we also have available right now recordings of the sessions. The first 5 days, the ones last week, are available on the ITU event page as well. So you can access them there. And the recordings from subsequent days would be posted in the coming days as they are completed. We begin today the forum aspect of our regional radio communication seminar. And the forum will comprise of a series of panel discussions on specific issues around the theme WRC 19 outcomes, challenges and opportunities for the region. And we'll be addressing the full range of issues that we see coming out of WRC 19 in this forum, in these forum discussions. So to get us going today, I would first like to invite my own Secretary General from the CTU, Ms. Bernadette Lewis, to give us some initial remarks. SG, please go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Nigel, and good morning to all. I think the protocols have already been established, but I will certainly acknowledge Mr. Mario Manowich, Director of the Radio Communications Bureau at the International Telecommunications Union. I'm not sure who else is on from the International Telecommunications Union. But once again, it gives me great pleasure to give some words of welcome at the start of the forum session of the Regional Radio Communications Seminar 2020 for the Americas. And the subject of the forum is the WRC outcomes, challenges, and opportunities for the region. And I think it is important at this time for me to state that collaboration is at the core of the work of the Caribbean Telecommunications Union. And we are pleased to be supporting the International Telecommunications Union in convening this virtual forum. And the benefits of collaboration have been clearly seen in the success of the first week's activities of the seminar. The content that was presented has been really helping to build the capacity of participants, and the attendance over the course of last week for these virtual meetings, the attendance has been consistently very good. We had an average of 261 persons daily from Monday to Thursday for the presentations on the ITUR and ITUD structure, study groups, and publications. Also terrestrial services, space services, and for the tutorials, we had some 208 participants. That would be last week, Friday, and Monday, yesterday. And the tutorials were on terrestrials and space services. And all of the sessions have been very well attended. So we are looking forward to the continuation of this ITU-CTU collaboration for the forum, which will be addressing broadcasting, emergency communications, aeronautical and maritime transport systems, 5G spectrum pricing, and a roundtable discussion on WRC 19 outcomes and the WRC 23 agenda challenges. And all of these topics, every one of them, they are of great importance to our lives now and in the future as we pursue the goals of universal connectivity and digital transformation in our region. So I am encouraging the participants who have registered to continue with us for the rest of the week. Policymakers, regulators, spectrum management practitioners, network operators, and other stakeholders will all benefit from the information, for the discussions, for the discourses over the course of the next few weeks. So, few days. So I thank you for joining us for the forum. And I'm looking forward again to very productive deliberations and beneficial outcomes for all of the countries of the region. So I thank you.
Thank you very much, Chief. I think that sets the stage very well for us beginning the forum here. We value very much, in fact, the collaboration we've had with ITU over these past several years, and I think this seminar is just one manifestation of the benefit. So now I would like to introduce and invite to address us the Director of the Radio Communication Bureau of the ITU, Mr. Mario Manowich, who would give us an overview of the forum, also helping setting the stage and WRC outcomes. Please go ahead, Mario.
Thanks very much, Nigel, and good morning to all of you. I'd like to acknowledge Ms. Bernadette Lewis, the Secretary General of the CTU. As we said at the beginning of this seminar, or the seminar part of this event, we are very happy to be collaborating with the CTU in this occasion and in all other occasions that we have the chance to do so. So many thanks for your kind collaboration and efforts to bring this to all the people from the region and in particular to the Caribbean. So, you know, if there is a benefit of this new situation around the world that inhibits us from seeing each other personally, is that these virtual events that we are forced to be organizing are allowing more people to participate and to benefit from them than the usual face-to-face events. And these numbers that Bernadette has shared with us are much higher than the normal number of participants that we have in this kind of regional events. And I would say that is more than double of the number of participants that we usually have. So this is a good side of a bad thing, which is this world pandemic that we are facing. So having said that, it's a pleasure to be here with you again and to start the forum part of this event. And as Nigel said, by introducing the main WRC-19 results and the impact on the region. So let's see if I can share my screen with you so that I can show you a PowerPoint presentation. It should work. Let's see here. There you go. So I hope you are all seeing the slides.
Yes,
so,
we are.
Okay, thank you. So, there you go. So as you know, the World Radio Communication Conference in 2019 was held outside Geneva for the first time since 2000. This is not usual due to the size of the conference. And this was, let's say, the largest ever WRC we had. And it was held in Sharm el-Sheikh in Egypt under the very kind hosting of the Egyptian administration. The numbers of this conference are all impressive. We have over 3,400 participants, which, as I said, is a first in a WRC, representing 163 countries and 130 other entities, regional organizations, private sector members, and academia members. We had a record number of proposals, around 2,600 proposals that were treated during the conference. And one of the new, let's say, aspects of this kind of conference in the last few years is that the excellent work that is being carried out by the regional groups, and in the case of this particular region is CTL, but also the CTU is contributing to CTL work in this regard for preparing the conference, is making this possible, that we can treat 2,600 proposals in a conference, because those are harmonized at the regional level by these groups, and then at the conference it's just a problem of trying to harmonize them globally, which is easier said than done, but at least is easier than having individual proposals from individual member states that you can imagine the number that we would arrive at. So as you know, the WRC-19, as well as any other WRC, has as main objective to update the radio regulations, which is the international treaty on the use of spectrum and satellite orbits that is 113 years old. So this is one of the major, let's say, products or let's say, frameworks that the international community has developed over the years, a set of regulations for the use of the spectrum and satellite orbits that has been there for more than 100 years. And despite all the geopolitical problems around the world, it has survived, and it is being updated and modernized every conference. And it allows for our sector to continue evolving and to continue providing the services it provides without interference and making sure that all services coexist in an harmonious way. So this is thanks to the participation of all stakeholders in the process. So it's not a process that is only geared by governments or only by industry or only by business. It's a mix of all of them that makes it possible to have this result that everybody adheres to. And it provides a predictable regulatory environment that is necessary for the investments of trillions of dollars that are necessary for this industry to continue progressing and to continue bringing services to all the world's citizens. So the motto of our conferences and our work is to enable new radio communication systems, innovative systems, while protecting the operation of existing systems. So nobody is being taken out in order to put somebody new in, but to find a way that everybody can coexist. And the most important aspect that is enshrined in the 82 Constitution is that we have to ensure the rational, equitable, efficient, and economical use of the radio frequency spectrum and satellite orbit resources. So, as you know, the main objective in these conferences for us as ITU is to ensure that we can achieve spectrum harmonization globally. So this is not necessarily possible in all aspects, but as much as possible, we try to ensure that the more we can harmonize, the more we benefit everybody. The harmonization of the spectrum and the harmonization of the standards used in equipment, it makes it more affordable for everybody, makes it interoperable, and makes it possible for everybody to travel around the world and roam internationally without any problem, while buying a relatively cheap device and using affordable services. Here we have some quotes of some important players or stakeholders, as we said, be them from the industry, terrestrial and satellite services, or from the governments. They are all most happy with this way in which we have been conducting these conferences for the benefit of all, and the idea is to continue doing it that way. So let's go to the main outcomes of the conference, as we said from the beginning. So as you know, the conference identified additionally globally harmonized frequency bands for the international mobile telecommunications, IMT, as we call the mobile services, including, or with special accent if you want, on IMT 2020, which is known as 5G in commercial terms. So this should provide for the increasing need for broadband services and applications by end user and by industries. This was one of the main objectives of the conference, to have additional identified spectrum for 5G, and it has been achieved. So there were three main bands in this regard, in the millimeter wave segment. The first one that was identified globally is the 26 gigahertz bands that you see there in the top one on the slide. That will probably be the first one to be implemented. In fact, there are some countries that have already auctioned this band already. And there are other two bands, the 40 gigahertz bands and the 66 to 71 gigahertz band, that are also being considered for others and for other wireless systems, such as the multiple gigabit wireless system. So there are other regional and country identification, as you can see below, but we are putting the accent on the global identification, which we believe is the one that can make the world advance at great strides. So the issue with this 26 gigahertz band was the protections that have to be accorded to the Earth exploration satellite services, as well as meteorological and other passive services in adjacent bands, as you know. So space research service and space-based monitoring of the Earth, they should remain unhindered by the use of this band by IMT services. So this was one of the most heated discussions during the conference. And as you can see on the slide, a two-step approach was decided to solve this issue. And there are safeguards there that go until the 1st of September 2027. And after the 1st of September 2027, the rationale there being that before that date, there will be less density of mobile stations or base stations, so that the accumulated interference would be less. So we don't need such a, let's say, such a big protection. And after 1st of September 2027, there will be a higher density of base stations and mobile stations. So we need a more, let's say, protective limit in order to avoid this accumulated interference to hinder these Earth observation satellites. So these safeguards are of special importance to the Central American and Caribbean region, as you know, as this is a region that is historically vulnerable to natural disasters. So accurate predictions and early warnings can drastically reduce the impacts of natural hazards in the region. So frequencies have been identified for IMT 2020 or for 5G. And this is, as I said, one of the main outcomes of the conference. But I just wanted to call your attention, in particular for the region, that historically, after the identification of frequency bands for IMT, countries may take some time, and even up to 10 years, to assign frequency bands nationally. In the case of the implementation of 5G in the Caribbean or in Central America, it is clear that many challenges need to be overcome before the use of high bands for 5G, and I listed there some of them. Obviously, operators need a business case that provides adequate return on their investments for this to be deployed. This means that the additional price that users are willing to pay for 5G needs to cover the cost of acquiring the spectrum, deploying the cell sites, and increasing the capacity of the backhaul. And all this is in a region that not necessarily have high gains of scale. So it's not to get too excited too quickly. It's in order for you to plan it properly and to take your time in order to do it, of course, but to do it properly. So other topics that were dealt with by the conference is, for instance, the RLANs. They have become one of the most common ways to access the internet. As you know, having this in mind, the WRC has changed the regulatory conditions to allow for the use of Wi-Fi devices in trains and cars, and to allow for limited outdoor use of the 150 and 250 megahertz bands that were more limited before. So this is a good improvement for Wi-Fi usage and other RLAN similar services. Another good result of the conference is regarding high altitude platform systems that are known as HAPS. Why do I say that this is important? Because they can potentially be used to extend the broadband connectivity to underserved communities. So they can provide either fixed broadband connectivity to end users or backhaul to operators. And this solution can be very relevant to the region, and in particular to Central America and the Caribbean. So it's an innovative solution that has been there for a long time, but it was never implemented technically. And now apparently the technology is there and we could do it. So it could provide a service to these underserved communities or rural communities with lower costs than the usual, let's say, satellite services or other type of similar services like that. Let's see how it goes. So, as you know, systems with a similar philosophy, and I say similar philosophy because the balloons and other such things are not yet assimilated to HAPS, so they are not yet there covered by the radio regs, but it's a similar philosophy that was used in the region to deliver emergency communications. when the hurricanes and other disasters stroke. But although this is acceptable because of a temporary deployment due to an emergency, when you go from a temporary to a commercial deployment that will be long-lasting, I will encourage you as regulators to use the frequency bands identified globally or regionally for HAPS. This, of course, will greatly reduce the risk of causing harmful interference to neighboring countries. So this is something important to take into account. Then, of course, satellites was also in the agenda of WRC 19. And as you know, the region has long relied on satellites for the provision of telecommunication services in general, and broadband in particular in the last decades. And we expect the non-geostationary orbit satellites, fixed satellite service constellations will improve the quality, increase the capacity, and reduce the cost of these satellite services. This last aspect is very important to reduce the costs, because obviously the satellites provide a great service to unconnected areas of the globe and in particular of the region. And if the cost remains under control, it could be a great solution for such services. So WRC 19 adopted, as you can see there, a new regulatory framework for these non-GSO networks. And it's a milestone-based approach reflected in this slide that together with the bringing into use can make all these networks that you hear that they are launching satellites every now and then feasible. And this also ensures the balance between preventing spectrum warehousing, which is to file for networks that are not going to be deployed, but that we keep the frequencies, and the proper deployment of the non-GSO system. So this will solve this issue, we hope, and find a good balance for all players. So the conference also addressed the challenge of providing reliable and high bandwidth internet services to Earth Station in Motion, or ESIMs, as we call it for short. And we have, as you know, aeronautical, maritime, and land ESIMs that can go on ships or on aircrafts or on land vehicles. And these new, let's say, regulations will ensure their safety, security, and comfort. And it's especially important for the Caribbean, considering the number of flights and cruising ships that operate in the region, and they will all be equipped with that, I'm sure. And last but not least, certainly, the gender declaration that was a first time ever also in a WRC was approved. And I hope it will have a significant impact in the sector, in our region, and around the world. As you know, there is a gender gap and a gender disparity in the ITU conference as a whole, but in the R sector, in the radio communication sector, this gap is even more evident. So I hope that this will encourage to go into more a balanced situation, and more women will be not only participating, but also, let's say, taking leadership roles in the preparation of the conference and during the conference itself. So as we are at the beginning of the study cycle, is the perfect time, in my view, to appoint female delegates as regional rapporteurs and representatives to ITU events. So in conclusion, the WRC will enable the introduction of new innovative technologies, increase the efficiency of the verticals, increase the connectivity in underserved areas, as we mentioned, with various means working together, satellites, HAPS, mobile services, terrestrial services, and other services, accelerate the digital transformation, which is so important for developing countries, enable the connection of people in ships, aircrafts, and land vehicles, as we mentioned, ensure the science services receive the necessary protection so that we can predict disasters and measure the various items of weather and other needs that we have in the region for Earth preservation. And of course, last but not least, again, increase the opportunities for women in the STEM fields in general. So this is in brief the results of the conference and impact on the region. And I thank you very much for your attention. Nigel, over to you.
Thank you very much to BI Director Mario Maniowicz. I think this gives us a very good foundation for all the panels to come. We will, in fact, over the next few days, be having panels dealing with the IMT, the other broadband matters, emergency communications, transport systems, satellite services, of course. That's the second panel on today. And we have also a special panel on, this is one that wasn't necessarily in on the WRC agenda, but we'll also have a panel on spectrum pricing, which is an issue for us in the Caribbean region for sure, and I believe as well for the rest of the Americas, as new services tend to be coming out of the developments of the radio communications. So we also will be addressing today, and in fact very shortly, a panel on broadcasting. So I think the background of all that you've presented, Director, in terms of what is coming out of WRC is excellent for us. So thank you very much, and thank you to my Secretary General as well, Bernadette Lewis, for getting us off for today.
Thank you. I must leave you, so
yes.
Thank you for everything, and I wish you a successful forum.
Thank you, thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Yes, so we will move right along into our first panel discussion, and we will start with broadcasting. I have the honor to be the moderator for this particular panel, and one of the last points that the director mentioned coming out of WRC was a gender declaration. I'm happy to say that we have quite a gender balanced panel for our first discussion on broadcasting towards digital terrestrial television, towards DTT. And I will moderate, as I said, and I have my other panelists who will speak. The first is Ms. Ilham Ghazi, who is the head of the Broadcasting Services Division in the ITU. Just to give you an idea of her background, and as I said, head of Broadcasting Services Division at the Radio Communications Bureau. She's been with ITU for 15 years, and among the things that she has done there, she has been appointed as the WRC Secretary, that's the World Radio Communication Conference Secretary during WRC 2007, when she dealt with the Appendix 4 revision. In WRC 2012, she was associated with the Working Group 5C on fixed mobile and broadcasting issues. And in WRC 19, she was on the Working Group 6B on the Future Conferences agenda. From 2010 to 2018, she successfully led DTT frequency planning in Africa, the Arab region, and Central America and the Caribbean in order to facilitate the transition to DTT and enable the release of spectrum in the relevant 700, 800 megahertz bands. We took part in the work in the Caribbean, of course, and we were quite pleased with the outcome, which was what we call a reference list, where countries of the region agreed to coordinate among themselves and use assignments in certain frequencies that allows all of us to share equitably the relevant spectrum with minimal cross-border interference. So that has now found its way into the operational work of the ITU and countries of this region as far as frequency assignments are concerned in the VHF and UHF bands. And Ilham has also in 2018 been appointed as a counselor, an interim counselor to the ITUR Study Group 6 and its working party. So she is well versed in the area of DTT. In addition, we also have Mr. Alan Ruiz, who is from Comtelca. He is the Executive Secretary of Comtelca, and this Comtelca is the Regional Telecommunications Technical Commission for Central America. He is currently the Executive Director there and also an expert tutor, global content coordinator at CIABAD. He has more than 25 years experience in ICT projects and telecoms in public-private sectors and international organizations. And he's also director, or he was also director of Radio Spectrum and Vice Minister of Telecommunications at the Ministry of Science, Technology, and Telecommunications in Costa Rica. So he would also have a good overview of what's happening in Central America in this regard. My next panelist is Ms. Carol Francis, and Ms. Carol Francis is the Programs Manager at the Public Broadcasting Corporation of Jamaica. And Carol is going to provide, I think, some real world balance to the discussions about DTT as far as the Caribbean is concerned. I will also give a little overview of what the CTU has been doing in terms of DTT, but to get the panel started, I will begin with Ms. Ilham Ghazi from the ITU, who would give us a good, I think, global overview of what's been happening in the area, and then I will take over. So Ilham, please, if you would go ahead. And just before you start, let me remind persons, as your questions come up, please post them into the Q&A, and that way we can manage them effectively in the limited time. So please, go ahead, Ilham. I think you're still muted.
Yes, Nigel, you are right.
Yes, I
okay,
can hear you now.
Thank you for that. So, good day, Nigel. Good day, Alan.
Yes.
Good day, Carol. Happy to be with you on this panel. Ladies and gentlemen, good day. So I don't have a presentation because I've been asked to do a keynote speech. So I did my best not to have a very long one, but to try to touch most important aspects of the digital switchover or digital television. So good day again. And of course, since a few years, whenever we speak about broadcasting, we automatically speak about digital switchover, which we call DSO, and which is the process in which analog television broadcasting is replaced by digital television broadcasting. DSO in general involves the following steps. The first one, simulcasting, which means establish the new digital services on temporary frequencies if required, and operate both analog and digital services for a period of time. Second step, analog switch off, which we call also the ASO, and it's the switch off of the analog services. And the third step would be the restacking, meaning to change the frequencies of the digital services to their final frequencies if required. Of course, as known to everyone, and it was already presented last week by my colleagues, the advantages of digital broadcasting, I mean, they are all known by everyone, but let me just remind very briefly. For regulators, it provides the fair competition to develop a terrestrial platform which would be competitive with the other platforms, especially in our digital era. The efficiency of spectrum, of course, as one frequency channel for the analog can be used by multiple programs, as known as multiplexes for digital television, and that provides the possibility to free of a part of the band of the other usage. I'll come to that later. For TV operators and content providers, also advantages are digital broadcasting allows significant decrease in transmission, operational costs compared to analog, also in the investment and transmission costs, and permits the development of new innovative services without more spectrum constraints, such as the mobile TV, data, games, interactivity, VOD, UHD, hybrid TV, IBB, artificial intelligence, that is the trend lately, augmented reality, virtual reality, and other new technologies related to broadcasting. So I am sure that the administration that already achieved the DSO and the ones that are in the process now know that DSO comes with many challenges, such as the frequency coordination with neighboring countries. To be able to use DTT only in the remaining parts of the UHF band and release the 700 megahertz in your region, and for some countries, the 600 megahertz band that are mentioned in the footnotes in the radio regulation. So it is essential to plan new additional frequency channels to ensure equitable access to spectrum resources. These new DTT frequency channels need to be coordinated before any operation in order to avoid causing or receiving any harmful interference. It also needed to be taken into account the process of definition of standards and compression techniques. Countries that have not yet migrated might consider moving directly into the latest DTT technologies, such as DVB-T2, ATSC3. The list is not exhaustive, so any other standard that allow more compression, and of course the compression technique, the MPEG-4 or HEVC. For the transmission part, rollout of DTT network infrastructure across the country, urban and rural areas is required. For the reception part, the migration depends heavily on the availability and affordability of set-top boxes for the citizens to receive digital broadcast signals. Amongst other factors, the affordability is a function of the minimum specifications that the set-top boxes must have the possibility to produce the equipment locally or import with reduced taxes, etc. And the availability is a function of the production and distribution capacity. This point also is very important, as many countries, they did everything right, the campaign, the communication campaign, the DTT rollout, and at the end they were stuck with the lack of set-top boxes or the digital television sets. So the other aspect is the funding and communication. Administrations should consider that funding might be required for the analog digital migration, subsidies in the reception, some kind of reduction in the prices of set-top boxes and or transmission sites, awareness campaigns, and coordination group committee to plan, oversee the migration process. So today, and according to ITU database, transition from analog to digital television has been achieved in Americas in 11% that completed DSO, 17% ongoing, and unfortunately, the rest of the percentage to reach 100 is unknown. So I take this opportunity, as my colleagues before that, and every time that we have the opportunity, to kindly ask all administrations to provide the information if it's the first time, or to update their DSO information that includes also the use standard, compression technique, etc. The digital switchover is a prerequisite for opening the concerned part of the UHF to broadband mobile. As mentioned by the BR director, Mr. Manievich, in his opening speech, not today's, but last week, there are portions of available spectrum referred to as digital assets that can be used to increase broadband connectivity in the region. The use of these available portions necessitate a successful frequency coordination to achieve interference-free and harmonization between territories, including overseas territories. Of course, no need to specify that harmonization is key to enabling the international roaming and the economies of scale necessary for the development of the mobile broadband ecosystem at an affordable price. And I think that Mr. Mario, in his today's speech, also make a hint to that point. This is also to guarantee a regulatory stability for the UHF band by providing long-term certainty to ongoing and planned investment for countries, whether it is investing in DTT or in mobile. It is important to mention that allocating the 600 and or the 700 megahertz band must be taken with precautions. As you all know, with its ability to provide large coverage, this part of the band also comes with the ability to produce interference on large distances. As long as these bands continue to be used by high power, high tower broadcasting stations, interference among these stations and between them and mobile-based stations and terminals is a very challenging issue, which has to be addressed very seriously by regulators before it is assigned to mobile broadband operators. Therefore, even if the band is available for IMT in a country, the use of broadcasting in a neighboring country may prevent the first country to deploy IMT in this band. This challenge might be overcome with frequency coordination between the various intended uses of the band in various countries by necessity at regional level. Such exercise was achieved for CAC in September 2018, and I'm happy to hear Nigel to say that CTU are quite satisfied with the results. That leads me to the end of my keynote speech, and I will be welcoming all your questions. So ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Ilham. I think that sets a good general background on the issue. I think what I would do now is take the opportunity to present what the CTU has been doing and what around the Caribbean has been happening with respect to DTT. So let me just take a second to share my screen here. Right, so hopefully that would be visible to you in terms of my giving a quick quick overview of the plans and status for digital switchover in the Caribbean. What has the CTU been doing? The CTU is really the regional intergovernmental organization for the Caribbean that deals with telecoms policy development, or should I say ICT policy development. And we've been doing that since 1989. And we've undertaken a couple of projects related to spectrum harmonization over the period. Related specifically to spectrum harmonization, our most recent major project has been the Harmonized Caribbean Spectrum Planning and Management Project, which ran to 2013-2016, and it produced a strategic plan which was inclusive of recommendations for digital switchover and the use of TV white spaces. That strategic plan is more like guidance for our member states, and we have 20 member states in the Caribbean. Actually, it's a combination of independent states and overseas territories. So mostly the English-speaking Caribbean, but also inclusive of Cuba, Suriname, St. Martin among the membership of the CTU. So we had technical groups discussing this issue with representation from our member countries. We call it the Spectrum Management Task Force. They do the technical work, and the Spectrum Management Steering Committee is like a government policymaker overview team that looks at, that oversees the work of the task force. So we produced this Spectrum Management Strategic Plan, which addressed DSO. Since 2014, however, if we look, to just take a quick view of who has converted in the Caribbean to digital. We've had Puerto Rico, we have the French overseas territories, the US Virgin Islands, the Dutch overseas territories as well. And the other CTU member countries, in particular the English-speaking ones, basically have been at various stages of planning. In Trinidad and Tobago, where I'm based though, and maybe also elsewhere in the Caribbean, because the same company operates in more than one country of the Caribbean, there have been some application-specific deployment. So for example, I mentioned Green Dot in Trinidad and Tobago. This is a company that provides internet access and what we call cable TV services, not via fiber or coax cable, but they have a wireless distribution method that uses DVB-T or DVB-T2 as the case might be. So we have the technology in use, not necessarily for the standard digital TV application that we have in mind when we talk about DTT and digital switchover. What the CTU have been trying to do is basically to harmonize in the countries and around the region what sort of technology standards should be used. And there are the various choices, the ATSC and DVB-T2 and the Japanese and Chinese standards and so on. So we've been trying to harmonize the technology around the Caribbean so that we get kind of economies of scale. Also trying to harmonize spectrum allocations and band plans, the network design approach, transition management checklists, and analog switch off targets. And we've been discussing this for several years. As I mentioned, we had that major project on spectrum harmonization. And one of the key issues we looked at was digital switchover. The challenges, though, of course, are that everybody's on a different spot, in terms of their transition journey. Coordinating them is difficult. They will have different goals and motivations. Some already have some work in train, some studies, some consultations in train. We still have some variations in the regulatory frameworks among our members. And the one key point for me is whether or not we've got the broadcasters on board with the whole digital switchover issue. And I think in this panel, we'll be hearing from one of the broadcasters in terms of what's going on in their own case. And we can have some discussions around that whole issue in terms of making it happen. Of course, as Ilha mentioned, there are lots of steps to go through, and what they call it, dual operation and analog switch off, and getting the right equipment to the customers and all these things. So resources and funding for all of those things, and various time constraints. But of course, all these things have to come together in order for it to happen. So I mentioned the strategic plan that was developed by the Spectrum Management Task Force. And this is the particular point related to digital switchover and TV white space management. The areas that were identified in terms of harmonization are listed 1, 2, 3 in the middle column there. And in the strategic plan, we said Caribbean countries should have a harmonized approach to determining the most suitable DTT and set-top box standards for their local needs. Recommended a distribution model which encourages a common carrier infrastructure to be adopted, like these single frequency networks, for example, or having one service provider put down the infrastructure throughout the different islands or countries, and have different service providers jointly utilize that common infrastructure. That was another recommendation coming out. And in terms of TV white spaces, it was said that countries should create an enabling environment through which the white spaces can be used to facilitate national and regional needs. And this more so related to broadband deployment. The column on the right was what we saw as, I guess, strategies that could be pursued. Countries were to determine their most suitable standards. And countries have been studying this. Countries have been studying this to a great extent. Here in Trinidad and Tobago, I know the regulator here had a committee that ran for a couple of years, really, which involved the operating companies, the regulator themselves, and different suppliers in the market to identify an appropriate technical standard. It hasn't come to fruition as yet because because the decision is not only a technical one, not just necessarily the best technical standard, but it must also be a commercially viable standard. So I'm saying that basically the countries are still on the road to deciding exactly how they might want to pursue these things. Also, we talked about developing the appropriate commercial and regulatory environment nationally to facilitate implementation of the common carrier model that had been recommended. And we also sought to harmonize any spectrum allocated for TV white spaces around the region. So as you can see, there weren't very many specific actions that we decided to take. We haven't yet reached a stage of implementing. And I think a key point, a key reason for getting there is that we also have to have the broadcasters on board with the solutions that are being proposed. And I'm not sure if we are there yet, and I'd like to hear, I look forward to hearing from our broadcaster on the panel some thoughts from their point of view. Ilham also mentioned digital assets, and this chart, which we had put together back in 2014, gives an idea of how well or how lightly utilized the relevant frequency bands are in the countries of the Caribbean. Typically in the countries of the Caribbean, there are not many broadcasters over the air. We started off basically having maybe a government-owned one, and in more recent times we've had some competing providers appear. But what this chart is showing down the left-hand column is several countries of the region, and the gray aspects of the chart show where basically we didn't get data. The white aspects of the chart, the white boxes in the chart, means that there is no usage, and the yellow aspects of the chart give an indicative indication of where there might be current usage, and current meaning at the time this chart was put together. As you can see, there's a lot of white. So in many cases, much and sometimes all of the bands are not in use. Down the right-hand column, you can see that most of the countries of the region have used or plan to use the part of the UHF for mobile. So we have a lot of free space in the VHF and UHF band for other uses. So maybe that's another consideration as to whether or not there's an urgency to clear out space in this band for other uses. People have already been able to find space in the relevant bands for mobile spectrum. So that pretty much gives you a quick view of where we are with respect to the CTU's work in this area of digital switchover. So you can see where the Caribbean countries' head is at present, and I will stop at that point. Just before I go on, I'll remind our participants that they can be posting any questions that might occur to them into the Q&A box, and we'll get to them after the presentations. So now I'll ask Mr. Alan Ruiz if he can take the floor and make his presentation on the issue. Alan from Comtelco, please go ahead. Remember to unmute.
I'm sorry. Good morning, Nigel. Thank you very much. First of all,
Yes.
I'd like to thank ITU for putting together this event. It was wonderful, and this webinar is very, very interesting and important to what we're doing in our regions.
Could you get a little closer to the mic?
Sure, sure.
Alan, yeah.
Is it better?
Yes, it's better.
Good.
It's better.
I'm gonna share my presentation. Okay. Thank you very much. Once again, thanks for the invitation. And when we talk about broadcasting, it's a very, very interesting issue from the technical perspective, but it is also an issue that it's important for our daily life. We grow seeing television. Television was not only an entertainment sort of information, but also educate us. It has to do a lot of with our political history in our countries. And basically it's something that it's a very important issue for our social development. So when we talk about the transition from analog to digital television, we're talking about a public policy which has to be taken carefully because it's a very important tool for, again, for our development. Comtelca, as Nigel mentioned, is an organization, a regional technical communication for our region. We basically an international organization in Central America. We cover countries from Mexico to Panama and Dominican Republic. We in total are 8 countries. We are organized in several committees. One of the committees is the Radio Communication Committee that you can see on the screen. We have a lot of participants, basically all our members in terms of the organizations that represent its country. For example, from Mexico, we have the SCT. From Guatemala, we have the CIT. From El Salvador, we have CIGET. From Honduras, we have CONATEL. From Nicaragua, we have TELCOR. From Costa Rica, we have MISIT. From Panama, we have ACEP. And from Dominican Republic, we have Intotel. We have other members. We have ANE from Colombia, ASIET, GSMA, and we also have the IFT from Mexico and SUTEL from Costa Rica. I put IFT in yellow because it's the coordinator for the committee. Basically, as you might figure it out right now, the committee is, its main responsibility is the spectrum. How do we use the spectrum, how we harmonize the spectrum. And we work with several other entities like CTEL, ITU. We as the committee, we are the interface for CCP, PCC2 in CTEL, and also with all the issues regarding a spectrum from ITU. Actually, we had a very complete program for WRC 19 in the previous year, and we're going to have it for the next WRC. We also work with some other international organizations like the FCC, from the US and the Agence Nationale des Fréquences in France, which is perhaps two of the entities around the world that help us throughout the digital transition. And we have studied with them, we have a workshop with them in terms of what they do with the digital switch over, and also what went well, what went wrong as success stories for us to develop our own plans. We have just signed an agreement with DSA, which is the Dynamic Spectrum Alliance. We're about to sign an agreement with 5G Americas and GSA. So we only not work with our members, but also we have basically with the entire community that deals with spectrum. Basically for our transition, one of the things that we have done is the Radio Communication Committee came up with this report. This report basically include what the countries are doing, what is the situation from the digital terrestrial television, as well all the all the challenges that each country have, all the situation in terms of their internal framework, and what are the challenges, and how can we support each other on this, basically on this transition. As you might remember, several years ago, the ITU came out with these guidelines from analog to digital broadcasting in 2012, and that was a very good document. A few years after, we had the opportunity to have this document in Spanish, and also we have some cooperation from CAF, which is a regional bank that supports us on this transition. And along with ITU, we have what we call roadmaps for basically all the countries. All the countries from Comtelca, well, part of this program, and we came up with all the roadmaps in order to help each country to have their transitions on the digital television, and this was very helpful. Thanks to this, some countries have been able to create their own roadmaps, and some of them have already success on the transition. Panama is pretty much the country from Comtelca that is leading the transition. Then we have Costa Rica that have made the switch over for some what we call Central Valley in Costa Rica. And recently, Honduras have been doing a very good job on their transition, and it's been very helpful lately. Along with this, guideline and all the roadmaps that we create with the help of the ITU, we also celebrated in Central America what we call a ministerial summit for the digital transition. And that was a very, very important event for us, because at that moment, the countries signed an agreement that we were going together working with the coordination within our countries for avoid harmful interference on this process. And this is something that right after that, we have approximately 6 different meetings around our cities, and we were able to put together a plan that will help the countries to go on with the process, with the transition, without have any or have not have harmful interference within within our region with our borders. And we have also create some sort of alliance between us in terms of what we're trying to do and share some experience, and that's pretty much what Comtelca are pursuing on this process. Basically, recently, pretty much a year ago, we updated the roadmap from some of the countries. At this very moment, we understand that the digital divide is a key element for the development of our countries. We have analyzed in this report how the broadcast market in our region is being changed since 10 or 15 years ago. The situation is very different. I think that the digital divide is a key issue for the broadband development in our country. So we stated that in that document, and we this is like a document that will help and will create or update their own roadmaps in terms of that the digital divide is probably very important to us based upon our numbers on the digital penetration, the digital gap, and what we could achieve with the wireless broadband in our country. So in each country is very important to develop and use the 700 megahertz band. Panama is one of the countries that have been used this ban already. Also, Nicaragua has deployed a network on the 700, which is very good, but we need the rest to do so. And we will try to help each single country to succeed on that roadmap. Basically, to end my presentation, I would like to highlight that our plans in Comtelca are basically based on the SDG 10, which is reduce inequalities. And what we try to do is to provide universal policies to use, to create public policies and take advantage of the spectrum, paying special attention in areas of disadvantage and marginalized population. And nowadays, this is even more important with the pandemic that we're living, and we're sure that we could be able to provide some sort of support and contribute to reduce the economic impact for this pandemic and for the economic recovery of our countries. And I would like to thank you for this opportunity again, and we will be more than willing to answer your questions. Thank you, Nigel. Next.
Yes. Thank you very much, Alan. That gives a good overview of what's happening in Central America. And I would now like to invite Ms. Carol Francis from the Public Broadcasting Corporation of Jamaica to give a presentation as to how do the broadcasters see this whole issue of digital switchover, and maybe views as well as to how you can see it going forward. Carol, please.
Good morning, all.
Good morning.
In my presentation, what I'll try to do is to show you some of the advantages and drawbacks of digital switchover and identify a number of challenges and policy dilemmas of making the switchover an achievable objective for broadcasters. So I'm talking from a station perspective, and I will just give that to you. So let me just share my screen to start. Are you seeing the screen?
Yes, yes, I'm seeing the screen.
So it says the status, challenges, and prognosis. Is that what you're seeing?
Exactly. All you need to do now is put it on slideshow mode, right?
Okay. So you're seeing everything now. Are you seeing the status, challenges, and prognosis?
I am seeing the status, challenges, and prognosis, but please put it on the right. Click there, slideshow.
Okay.
I haven't gotten it changing yet. I mean, as I say, we can see it. It's just not. It's just could be bigger if it goes onto the slideshow.
Okay, I'm trying to put it on there. I don't know if it's my computer.
Yeah, I see that. Like it's kind of
freezing up.
Freezing up or something.
Okay, so.
Right, but you could probably give it a few minutes and actually see if you can change the slide even in this mode. Try to bring up the next. Right. Okay. All right.
Are
So
you seeing it?
yes, I can see that analog versus digital.
Okay.
Right. Yeah.
So I'm trying to see if it's something with my connection which is causing you to not be able to see the slideshow. Okay, so let me start.
Yes.
And I'm just going to skip past the whole analog versus digital because everybody is aware of that.
Right. Okay.
So are you seeing analog versus digital now, smartphone?
Yes.
Twin with social? Okay.
Yes.
So I wanted to start there because without despite any hesitancy, despite what it is that we're thinking, digital switchover is a must. The rapid change in technology means that in a few years' time, the analog equipment will be obsolete.
Agreed.
digital technology is not confined to television, nor indeed to broadcasting. Consumers have become accustomed to it through mobile telephones and computers and other electronic devices. So the smartphones, twinned with social media like Facebook, YouTube, WhatsApp, Twitter, Instagram, also place journalism in the hands of Jamaicans. In fact, in everybody who has those devices. So we have a lot of citizen journalists who are using their personal recording devices and cell phones to capture events and post them on the internet. So we have a challenge. The other thing I wanted to just, before I go any further, is just to explain to you about what it is that we do as a public broadcasting entity in Jamaica. We were created by an act of parliament, and we host one of the largest audiovisual collections in Jamaica. And our purpose is to promote and protect Jamaica's culture and heritage by collecting, securing, and documenting all of these records. And we are partially funded by the Jamaican government. So we look at what it is that is happening and the benefits of this digital switchover. So there was a national digital switchover steering committee to guide Jamaica in its digital switchover process established in 2015. In 2012 rather. And it involved various stakeholders, chief amongst them, the broadcasters and the consumers, because it is a cost to all the stakeholders, because we will all benefit in one way or the other from this switchover. So when we look at the benefits of the digital switchover, the Caribbean is a politically, geographically, and economically fragmented region because of how we are situated geographically. And it accounts in part for the differences in the speed with which digital switchover can and is taking place. And we have to also consider, for example, a public broadcaster like ourselves, that we are funded by government. And there are other issues to consider: the market size, the various platforms that now exist, and that it is that we have to be using for when we're talking about the digital switchover. Are you still able to see the slideshow? Are you seeing it now? Hello?
We're seeing the slides, but not in slideshow mode. That's the only thing.
Okay, I'm still trying to get it working.
Yeah. Right.
Okay.
As I say, it's a satisfactory workaround because we can still see the slides, you know?
Okay. All
Yeah.
right. So when we look at the positive impacts to Jamaica's economy, is a range of available choices when we're talking about the consumers. And it is estimated that more than 800,000 television households in Jamaica will benefit from the switchover because they would have access to a lot of new services, greater spectrum efficiency. We're looking at expanded choices, improved efficiency for public service broadcasters, more specialized minority interest programs being developed, and the streaming of existing content, extended coverage, and what is critical is the greater level of interactivity. Interactivity is going to be key in this whole dispensation, because if there is no interactivity, we are going to lose our viewers that we would have as regular broadcasters when we go into a digital mode.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I'm trying to see how we have gone all the way back. So let's get to where we are supposed to be. Okay.
Right.
But there are a number of things we have to think about when we talk about how we are going to switch over and what it is that we have to have in place to allow this to continue, to happen. So the startup costs. So digital transmission costs, the cost of putting in the new equipment while maintaining the existing analog transmission is going to be extremely prohibitive for a lot of entities, because we already have infrastructure in place. And so to move from that to something else means a whole lot of investment. Public broadcasters, I have to keep reminding you, are dependent on funding. So that kind of infrastructure cost, we cannot absorb. We don't have that funding for that. Now, the available financial resources. So many broadcasters are faced with dwindling incomes. The competition for attention, advertising, and the limited number of people who pay for online news. Now, these are just a few examples of what legacy media, all the persons that have been there before from the get-go, has to deal with. That to make a profit from their digital news operation, despite some in 20 years of often substantial investments and significant audience reach, is going to be challenging. You also have the problem with the fact that a lot of telecommunication giants in the Caribbean, for example, I'm going to speak specifically to Jamaica, like Digicel and Flow. Okay, I don't know how I got that there again.
Yeah, but it has gone to slideshow mode now.
Okay.
Right, okay.
Okay. So Digicel and Flow, which are the largest telecommunications provider in Jamaica, have cut into the earnings that we would have. So they have launched cable systems and television platforms. So now they are direct competitors to the traditional broadcasters. And increasingly too, what has happened is that the individuals have become media brands. Bloggers are cutting into our traditional media market shares. In Jamaica, for example, there are Bella Blair and Dottie Berry, which are two good examples of what I'm talking about. They have their own audiences, their own content, and their own distribution strategies that we also have to compete with now. PBCJ, although we are government funded, we are ahead of the game in some aspects compared to other broadcast entities because we are virtually HD ready. So if every content provider was to give us an HD signal, we are equipped and ready to accept that signal. And as of last week, we started broadcasting in HD. Now, what happens now is that we record in HD, we get content in HD. That's what was happening to us before. We have to down convert the signal to analog to feed the current market. We are able to have our HD equipment in place because we had very little equipment to start with. In 1997, our startup was very minimal. We had very little infrastructure, so we had to start building. But because we were anticipating a digital switchover, we were already making purchases in HD in anticipation of the switchover. The other consideration is that the skill sets. Is the staff complement at these broadcasting entity equipped to deal with the new technology? Now you have persons who have been working in the industry for years with analog equipment. They understand all of what is required and how to get it done. You now have to retrain these persons to be able to handle the new equipment and what is going to be coming. There is also a need for public awareness. Persons must be told what is going to happen and explain the importance of how it will happen. And it means then that everybody has to come together and there has to be a focused public awareness campaign. Everybody has to be on the same page, explaining what it is that is going to happen, how it will benefit all of us and why we need to be a part of it. Because the reality is, if there's a digital switch over and you don't have the equipment to be able to access it, there is going to be a challenge. Now, there is the other issue of incentive, or rather the lack of incentives. Because when you say to someone, okay, you have already bought all of this television or whatever it is that you're using to be able to access the broadcast, you now say to them, you're going to have to buy other devices. You're going to have to buy receivers, whatever it is, to be able to access this new way of transmitting. And so, is it that the government is going to be providing this free equipment? How is it that this equipment is going to be bought, and who is going to be responsible? Is it the consumers? What is their reaction going to be? Which is why you now go back to the whole issue of the public education campaign. And of course, I've heard it mentioned on several occasions that there has to be collaboration between the broadcasters. And what it is that is most important is a need for public policy. Now, we have to work together to arrive at policies that take into account the investment required for this to take place. And the policy must be all inclusive. Everybody has to be included. There's a need to revise the current spectrum management policies to support the digital transmission framework. And policy is also needed to minimize the risk of legal challenges. And as you see there, no policy position has yet been taken regarding what digital standard that we are going to be using. The other thing too is the need for more digital content. A lot of the content that we now have are not born digital content. It is all content that's analog, which means that we have to migrate and digitize all of this. And of course, the window of opportunity to convert the analog content is closing fast because a number of the equipment that's required is obsolete or becoming obsolete. You can't get them to buy. You have to be constantly fixing and upgrading to be able to migrate. And the technology is changing so quickly that you have to think about how are you going to store this material so that we can access it. So access becomes an issue. And of course, now, what is it that we have to do? And what it is that we have to do is incorporate a greater use of internet-based technology to deliver our content, right? So also when I go, and I'm going to tie this back into the point that I made about citizen journalists, because we live in a Burger King generation. Your way, right away, we want it. No, no, no. Broadcasts tend to respond slower than them. And so we have to think about what it is that we're going to do, because something happens out there, everybody whips out their device, electronic device, and it's out there long before we are out there. So we have to also look at not just speed, but credibility and how we are going to be able to use the same devices, the same platforms to be able to provide the content for persons.
We're almost out of time.
Okay, and so I also wanted to talk just quickly about niche programming, because digital switchover means a lot of opportunities for us. And so we are able to also get on board, and that will be a benefit to us as well. We can also think, and I quickly wanted to talk about the need for new laws and regulations as it relates to this whole thing. There are a number of challenges of regulating digital technology, especially in the areas of privacy and data protection. So we have to also bear that in mind, and that is critical to what it is that we're going to be doing. So the whole issue of intellectual property, and so because if you get a licensing agreement, my licensing agreement allows me to air the content in Jamaica, but it does not allow me to air the content in Barbados, Trinidad, or anywhere else. And how do I get past that? Because on a platform like a YouTube or whatever, you're going all across the world. So the need for laws to govern all of this has to be borne in mind. Okay, so I'll just, and so I said, the new regulations have to bear in mind innovations that are transforming the media landscape, including information technology, robotics, artificial intelligence, virtual and augmented reality. So thank you so very much.
Yes, thank you very much, Carol. I think you've articulated a lot of the challenges that were relevant to the outcomes of our Spectrum Management Task Force work. Certainly, you mentioned additional competitors in the market, new competitors in the market. Even the telecoms companies are now in the market. So clearly, the broadcasters have to look at adjusting their business models to remain relevant and so on. What is important, I think, to realize as well is that the new competitors like the telecoms companies have come in and competed without putting up broadcast networks. So the question, one question to be considered is, to what extent is broadcasting going to remain separate in terms of network and infrastructure from broadband? You know, is it that broadcasting is going to end up on broadband and so on, for example? So maybe I could, oh, and there's a specific question that I want to draw people's attention to in the Q&A from Kirk Sukram in Trinidad. And he's saying, for countries that have few free-to-air TV broadcasters and considering A to D switchover, can a common carrier DTT platform implementation approach result in a cost reduction for each broadcaster that will now have to use this platform? So what he's saying is that if we're going digital broadcasting, could we reduce costs for individual broadcasters if we have a common infrastructure that they all share? I think in theory that could work. Maybe I could ask Alan if that sort of approach has been considered in Central America, and maybe Carol, you can make a comment as to whether this might be a palatable idea to broadcasters. So Alan first. And
thank you. First of all, well, the question is very interesting and also is one of the key discussions on this digital transition. First of all, none of our countries have few broadcasters. So we have a very, very large amount of broadcasters on each country, so that the transition is very difficult, especially when you choose the way of you're going to do your transition by simulcast or whatever. But the question is very interesting because I do believe that we will share resources. We will optimize the use of a spectrum if we do so. I think that the issue here is not technical, it's more political. And the broadcasters are more willing to keep their own frequency than share it. I have seen some examples that they share their infrastructure, but within a common agreement that has nothing to do with the policy, which is a shame, I believe, but in some sort of way it's a good thing, because they are saving some infrastructure, and also they're using better the spectrum in a more efficient way. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Carol, you have any comment on that question as to whether common infrastructure could be a practical solution for broadcasters? You're muted right now.
Okay, so a ton of content flows from various networks and devices, and the flow of content is no longer controlled by infrastructure, as information can be had over the internet via wired or wireless networks. However, the internet has very unique features that makes regulations very complex and challenging. And the issue around programming, access, and rights clearance are not simple and clear-cut ones. They're not simple, clear-cut things. The fact of the matter is there is an opportunity that we can all seize, and it would, I think that is where we need to be going.
Yes.
The collaboration has to be there, and the will has to be there in terms of the policies that will guide what it is that we do.
Ilham, I don't know if you have any experience or from any of the other areas of the world in this type of approach. I think you're muted.
Okay, do you hear me now? Okay, sorry. Yes, well, I mean, to answer this question, I right away see at least 2 points. However, they must be calculated on a long term. So broadcasting on a long term, this is also another discussion. The long term, so for example, if you take the same region and you cover it with analog, you will pay much more for electricity than covering the same thing with the digital, because you need less power for digital than for the analog to cover the same area, let's say, the same city or area. That's the first point. The second point, also on a long term, it will be the maintenance. as Carol and I think Alan and I mean already mentioned, and yourself also, it's that I mean the analog in everything, not only broadcasting, is dying. So when you need spare parts or you need maintenance or something, you will not find the parts, necessary parts. You will not find maybe the necessary experts or to change it. So on a long term, also the maintenance costs, it will be better on digital. So to answer that, maybe if 1 or 2 free air is through that sharing the multiplex is not the same economy that can be done if compared with the 7 or 8 TV programs, but still on a long term, I think that at least this points the electricity bills and also the maintenance cost. Thank you.
All right, folks, I think we'll have to leave it there. We are a little over time, and we do have another panel that starts in about 10 minutes. So I think we can leave it there. I will thank my panelists, Ms. Ilham Ghazi from the ITU, Mr. Alan Ruiz from Comtelca, and Carol Francis from PCB Jamaica. I think we've raised a lot of points there. We probably could take another 60 minutes or so discussing and exploring them, but time is against us, and we'll leave it there for now, and I'll invite you to stay on and also assist with the panel that follows shortly on satellite systems, which might also be relevant for broadcasting. So thank you very much, all.
Thank you. Thank you.
Indeed, we will take a break now, and we'll be back to start the next panel at 10:45 a.m., which is only in about 8 minutes. So take a quick break, and we'll be right back. I'll introduce the panel when we get back. Thank you. Okay, welcome back, folks, to the second session of our seminar today. And we will be having in this second session till about 12:15 our second panel discussion. This time the topic is satellite systems, and we'll be looking at topics like high throughput satellite systems, non-GSO constellations, and earth stations in motion, and so on. And to take us through this particular panel, our moderator is Mr. Patrick Masambu, who is the Director General of the International Telecom Satellite Organization, or ITSO. ITSO, as we say. So I will invite Patrick now to introduce his panel and moderate. Patrick, please.
Thank you very much, Nigel, and it's a pleasure to be with you. A very good morning to all of you colleagues and participants to the Radio Seminar 20 being held in online. My name, as mentioned by Nigel, is Patrick Masambu, DG ITSO, an international intergovernmental telecom satellite organization which is based in Washington, DC, and comprises of 149 member states. It's a pleasure to be your moderator for this session that will be focusing on satellite systems, and more specifically, the high throughput satellite systems, the non-GSO constellations, and the eSIM. It is aiming at setting the scene with the scene at the forum in respect of satellite industry in the areas of technologies, policy and regulatory issues, as well as other developments, and especially following the conclusion of WRC 19. In the keynote earlier this morning from the director BR, we had a very good summary of the outcomes coming out of WRC 19, which leads very well into the detailed presentations we are going to have during this session. With me on the panel to bring out the issues, I have a number of top-level representative panelists that comprise of Mr. Fernando Carrillo, Mr. David Meltzer, Ms. Suzanne Malloy, and Mr. Ryan Johnson. And to introduce them, my plan is to introduce them by going through their CVs very briefly, and then thereafter introduce them, invite each of them to make presentations that will last about 10 minutes each. And that will then be followed by the question and answer portion of the session. Mr. David Meltzer is the Secretary General of the Global VSAT Forum, where he leads the advocacy efforts on behalf of the satellite industry, regulators, while providing members with benefits in areas such as training, organizing conferences, and so on. He previously worked for Intelsat for 15 years in various roles, including as its general counsel. Fernando Carrillo has an extensive experience in the technical regulatory aspects in spectrum planning and management, as well as satellite communications planning and coordination. The experience having been acquired during more than 22 years of successful career in telecommunications regulatory entity of Mexico, and more recently at the EchoStar Hughes, where he's in charge of the development of strategies and policies to guarantee the company's access to spectrum and orbital resources. Ms. Susan Malloy is the VP Legal and Regulatory Affairs for SES, focusing on regulatory strategy for non-geostationary satellite market access, as well as regulatory and spectrum policy. Previously, Ms. Malloy served as the Vice President, Regulatory Affairs for O3B Networks, with responsibility for global market access strategy, advocacy, and licensing for O3B's satellite-enabled connectivity solutions. And then, finally but not least, Mr. Ryan Johnson is responsible for government and regulatory affairs in Latin America and the Caribbean for Viasat. In that role, he participates actively in national, regional, and global processes related to regulatory matters affecting the satellite broadband industry. Before he joined Viasat, Mr. Johnson led the cybersecurity policy practice at Access Partnership. So that's the team of the panelists that we are going to have this morning. And now to head directly into our discussions, I would like to invite Mr. Fernando Carrillo to start off the ball in this session. Fernando. Hello?
I'm not seeing him on the list right now, so I don't know if he dropped off. I recall he had a activity issue this morning, so.
There is a message from Fernando. He's having technical difficulties. Patrick, if you prefer, I'm happy to jump in while hopefully Fernando's able to reestablish the contact. Oh, I see Fernando perhaps has joined.
Ah, no, but he is not able to present. Let me see if I could help him out there. 1 second.
Okay, thanks. Thank you.
Chat task log make host. Fernando, are you able to get in now? All right, let me try a thing. Let me try something else. Yes, Fernando, we see you. Please. You should be able to go ahead now.
We can't hear you, Fernando.
We're not hearing you. All right, this is coming. Connecting to audio. No, it's, can you say something now? Maybe we can hear. No, not yet. All right, maybe David could go ahead while we try to get him back in. Yeah, David, maybe David should go ahead because he's having a problem.
Okay, well, happy to jump in as hopefully Fernando can work out the technical issues. And I know that everyone participating in this conference is familiar with technology. We all use it, but we're all, I'm sure, painfully familiar of the issues that occasionally arise. So
yes.
Okay.
So we're all here to talk about communications, and let me start by communicating my thanks not only to Patrick for moderating this wonderful panel, but also to the ITU and the Caribbean Telecommunication Union for the invite to serve on the panel. As Patrick said, I lead GVF, Global VSAT Forum, which is the global trade association for the satellite industry. We have members from all regions of the world, save Antarctica, and if we could find someone there, we'll sign them up. And our members represent companies throughout the entire ecosystem of the satellite industry, not just operators, but the ground segment manufacturers, satellite manufacturers, service providers, truly the whole range of the satellite ecosystem. And I'd like to start in my few minutes of presentation time to just remind everyone who's dialed into this call what it is that makes satellite communications such a critical component of the global communications network. First, as I think everyone knows, the satellites are sitting up in space, whether they are geostationary, middle orbit, or even low Earth orbit. But that affords them a view of large geographic regions for geostationary satellites. They visibly see, if you will, and are able to provide communication links to 1/3 of the globe at a single time. And it's that ubiquitous coverage, which I think is one of the prime advantages of satellite communications. It allows satellites to provide global connectivity. It can extend the cellular network and even serve as a backhaul. Another critical advantage, I think, of the satellite communications network is its reliability. Reliability greater than 99.9%, and in many cases 4 or 5 or even sometimes 6 nines in terms of reliability. And in part that's because satellites again are sitting up in space, which means they're not subject to the unfortunate natural and man-made disasters that afflict not just the world, but of course the region of the Americas, whether they be earthquakes, hurricanes, mudslides, or a whole sort of range of natural disasters which can destroy the Earth-based networks. Satellites, again, largely the infrastructure is up in space, and they are both technically reliable and not subject to the natural disasters that we see in other networks. Satellites, and this may be news, hopefully not, but for some people listening in, satellites, it's not my grandfather's satellite anymore, if I can borrow a phrase. Satellites are able to deliver tremendous amounts of data, whether they be through technical advances such as high throughput systems or advances in modems and ground-based equipment. Satellites today are able to regularly deliver broadband services, and you'll hear about this, I suspect, from some of my other panelists. In fact, speeds of greater than 100 megabits per second. Similarly, satellites, the cost of satellite capacity has come down very, very significantly over the last 5-10 years, again, through advents in technology, whether they be high throughput satellites or advances on the ground segment. The costs of satellite services have really been reduced, and they are cost effective for a wide range of services and end users. Another advantage of satellite communications, the ability to be targeted and dimensioned via spot beams to deliver specified amounts of capacity to specific customers and users and specific even devices. And finally, satellite communications, they're proprietary closed network systems. And this means enhanced security, which I think we're all very concerned about, cybersecurity and other efforts to take over systems. And satellites have some inherent advantages. I now just want to spend a few minutes talking about two areas of advances, if you will, or advantages in particular telecommunications networks. And first I want to talk about 5G. And I think everyone who's participating in this conference is familiar with the potential for 5G. We are admittedly in the early days of the rollout of 5G. And whether you believe that 5G will gain tremendous momentum in the next 6 months, 12 months, or 24 months, I think everyone participating in this conference is convinced that 5G will not only supplant 3G and 4G, but it will do so much more than the previous generations of telecommunications. When it comes to 5G, satellite, much like 3G and 4G, will and is already playing a role through efforts with 3GPP. The 5G standards include satellite networks. The 5G networks that have already been deployed are taking advantage of satellite communications for the provision of a whole range of services, mobile backhaul, emergency services, disaster response, of course, news gathering. But I think the real potential for satellite-based communication services when it comes to 5G is in the Internet of Things. Satellites, again, given their unique advantages that they see much of the world sitting in orbit, whether it be GEO, MEO, or LEO orbit, the fact that they're reliable lends themselves to all sorts of applications in the Internet of Things. It could be aquaculture, it could be the industrial Internet of Things, machine-to-machine communications. So really the potential for a satellite to serve in the 5G network when it comes to the Internet of Things is virtually unlimited. Certain applications will require very low latency, and satellite can address those needs for those few low latency type of applications through low Earth orbit and as well as medium Earth orbit. I next want to talk about an issue which I think for many people in this session are very concerned about. They have a mandate to help reduce the digital divide. And satellites, again, play a very significant role in bridging the digital divide. And you will hear about that, I suspect, from some of my fellow panelists. The satellites have demonstrated their ability during the COVID-19 pandemic. We are linking hospitals as well as educational institutions in rural communities as well as urban communities. In some of the very developed countries, we've seen satellite communications established in the parking lots of hospitals to allow the transmission of data to and from the hospitals to help fight the pandemic. And then, of course, satellites are today widely used and increasingly will be used to provide broadband connectivity to underserved rural communities that otherwise have no access to affordable broadband connectivity. And you will hear about that from some of my fellow panelists as well. Just to conclude, since this is a conference focusing on the World Radio Communication Conference, decisions taken at WRC 19 are going to provide a whole range of opportunities for satellite communications at WRC 23. I'm thinking about agenda items such as 1.15, 1.15, which concerns FSS Earth stations for geostationary satellites to communicate with aircraft and vessels, the ability of non-geostationary orbiting satellites to communicate with Earth stations in motion in the Ka band, satellite-to-satellite links, inter-satellite links for Ku and Ka band to help with the transmission of tremendous amounts of data. And finally, 1.18, which concerns new mobile satellite allocations for narrowband mobile satellite systems. So a range of opportunities that will be studied in the next 3.5 years in the run up to WRC 23. And I think the end conclusion is that satellite communications play a very critical role today and will increasingly do so in the future. So with that, thank you, Patrick, for the time, and very much hope, and I see that Fernando has fixed the technical issues. So thanks again.
You didn't unmute your mic, Patrick.
Thank you very much, David, for that introduction. In fact, it is an excellent way of introducing the whole aspect of satellite communications to the audience. And so we'll now follow on through that with inviting Fernando to make his presentation. Fernando.
Fernando, can you hear us? I'm still not seeing him appear. He's apparently connected, but we.
Hi, Nigel. It looks like in the chat there's a request to upgrade Fernando back to panelist status. I'm not sure if that's the
Well, yes, he is.
We see him on the list of panelists.
Okay.
Yeah, he is on a list of panelists. So actually now, looking at his name on the list, we seem to have lost his mic symbol. So I guess we still have audio challenges there. All right. Maybe Patrick, you could.
We can move on, I think.
Again, yeah.
Susan, are you able to take your floor?
I am.
Oh, please do then. Appreciate it.
Great. Okay, thank you very much to the ITU and to the CTU. Oh, where shall we? I don't know if we want to continue with Fernando. I'm happy to continue until we're able to confirm Fernando's full connectivity.
Maybe he's on his phone.
Yeah, actually I am, but I don't want to interrupt. Are you hearing me now?
Yes.
I'm sorry very much, guys. I mean, I probably, I'm in the phone, so I cannot go through my presentation. So I don't know if maybe someone else can put the presentation on. I don't know what's happening with my computer, but the audio is just not working. So if not able to someone, I mean, I don't know, Joaquin or someone to put my presentation, I can go through it, or if not, I can allow Susan go in and then I will try to fix this from my computer.
Right.
Maybe we could try to give the floor now to Susan. Meanwhile, we try to solve this problem with Fernando.
Excellent. Thank you.
Okay.
So Susan, go ahead.
Susan, if you can continue.
Perfect. Then I'll share my screen.
Okay.
And if folks could let me know for sure when they can see it. And then I'll go to full screen mode. Great. Okay. So again, thanks to the ITU for organizing a seminar in our region, and to the CTU for organizing this as well and providing a forum for this. The focus for this presentation, and again, I'm Suzanne Malloy with SES. Focus for this presentation is non-geostationary constellations and sort of advances in satellite technology related to those. Just as a preview, since today is focused on WRC, what I'll do is I'll go through this particular constellation that SES has, but first just to mention that WRC 19 very much, WRC very much set the stage for non-GSO constellations by items that addressed our bringing into use of our non-GSO constellations and making the regime very clear for that. Also with respect to spectrum. We have already, with SES, launched and have in operation a non-geostationary constellation in medium Earth orbit. And so it's very important that while in order to advance 5G, We've identified a huge range of frequencies, low, mid, and millimeter wave band for 5G, that there are still abundant frequencies that were made available to make sure that we can continue to deliver the ubiquitous services that we do in the KU band, in the C band, and in the KA band. And most of the constellations that I'll be mentioning today are focused either on KA or KU band for non-GSO constellations. Our own constellation is exclusively KA band. So again, WRC 19, while setting the stage for a millimeter wave band rollout for 5G, also made sure that there's still ample spectrum available to continue doing what we're doing and to expand what we're doing for non-GSO constellations. And that sets the stage for mobility applications and for innovation that I'll describe in terms of how our satellites operate dynamically. Looking to the future for WRC 23, we're also studying how we can use frequencies between satellites. So this would be between low Earth orbit satellites and geostationary satellites, or between MEO satellites, also non-geostationary satellites and geostationary satellites, to be able to get maximum use of efficient use of spectrum, but also to allow new applications, including Internet of Things applications. So again, what I hope to focus on is not so much what the technology does, and this is very much what the WRCs are focused on, but for the benefit of our audience today, what services are going to be made available with these constellations. So for SES in particular, we, again, focus not on how we do it, but what we end up allowing our clients to do and the services that we allow them to provide to end users. Basically, we think of this as global managed data services. So we're very much involved in making sure that we can deliver the ability to use applications over geostationary satellites and non-geostationary satellites, so that the best possible service, highest speeds, most efficient uses of spectrum can be taken advantage of by our customers. So that's changing lives by connecting people. And there's a range of markets that we serve, telcos and mobile network operators with backhaul, cloud, the ability to do what we're doing now, Zoom, just a typical cloud application. And we're taking it for granted after being cooped up for so long. But this is basically what we're trying to share with everybody with our satellite constellations, the ability to do whatever they need to do, whether it's to talk with their families or to talk with their colleagues or to conduct their business. Internet service providers we have continued to serve, and my colleague Ryan Johnson will talk about how we're enabling that kind of connectivity through Wi-Fi. We serve enterprises. A big advantage of our own constellation as a non-GEO constellation, and of the ones that are being launched for maritime, for aero, for energy, is that we have mobility. We're able to serve mobile platforms, whether it's planes, whether we're on planes or on ships, because we expect this connectivity wherever we go now. And last but not least, and I'll talk about COVID, we will have government services that we are able to expand services to, just because we'll be able to reach more people, connect more people with their governments, no matter where they are geographically in their countries. So we do this in SES by means of a multi-orbit constellation. So while I won't dwell on them, we have both wide beam coverage for geostationary satellites and high throughput satellite coverage, which will also be discussed. In the frequencies that are used by these constellations, as I mentioned in the beginning, are C, KU, and KA band spectrum for all of these types of technologies, delivering applications like video, which will be very important in 5G. There's the ability to multicast, to have local access to video because of our satellites, and to reach remote regions. And I don't like to think of it as just reaching remote regions, but connecting remote regions with resources, whether they're in cities or in other remote areas in their own countries. And last but not least, Our own MEO constellation is 20 satellites. It's called O3B for the other 3 billion. We are building and will launch next year, and I'll get to that, 7 new satellites that are completely different technology. And we can have 2 gigabits per beam. We have low latency. I'll talk about that as a major advantage, also the new non-geostationary constellations. And that low latency allows us to have performance that's similar to fiber, which allows us to do what we're doing right now. We might be somehow connected closely to landline. We might all be in cities, but we, as I'll discuss, we're able to do this no matter what city and no matter what region we'll do with our MEO satellite. So specifically on our MEO satellite, we've been in operation since 2015. So the fact that we can do this and that it's a viable service commercially, that the operation of it is allowing the types of applications we're enjoying now, and that technically this is more than doable. It's here. That we've proved over the past 5 years with O3B. We've been able to allow folks in remote regions and to connect with cities and to supply in cities of some significant size, 3G, 4G, LTE. And in the future, because of the low latency of our non-geostationary constellation, we'll be able to support certain 5G applications that require that particular feature. That low latency allows us, or is what enables us to have fiber-like quality in a non-geostationary constellation for our MEO constellation. The carrier grade reference is a reference to our ability to mimic that fiber performance and to satisfy this kind of application that we're doing right now. Again, it's for both urban and rural networks and very useful for governments. A specific example is in Peru. Iquitos is a city in the Amazon, but what they're able to get as a city of some size, but not otherwise really having good fiber connectivity, is the same performance that's enjoyed in their major city, which is Lima. They're able to access cloud applications. Again, Zoom, Facebook, the typical day-to-day cloud applications that we use, perfectly able to access them in a remote city because of non-geostationary access. And I invite you, when this presentation is available, to visit the links to learn more about how this is deployed. I said I'd mention how non-geostationary satellites are able to help in specific government applications. And this is one. We have been able to help our partner Skynet, who's already a service provider, so that we were able to bring up service really within days of the time that it was needed. We were able to help them bring a hospital online and also to bring 5 free Wi-Fi hotspots online in a city that's also at the top of the Amazon. So this is fiber-like connectivity. This means that they're able to connect with other health professionals, either in Bogota or globally, wherever it's needed. And there was also the ability to make sure that students locally could have access to e-learning programs. So for government, we expect that you'll see these same kind of benefits with other non-geostationary constellations that can bring lower latency and expand the range of applications that satellites are already bringing to these kinds of communities. Specifically, when in the future, our satellite, the system that we're launching next year, will have beams that are dynamically programmable. So that's why you see so many. We can put them down and take them up as needed. So let's say that fiber eventually does come to an area that we serve, we can go on to make sure that we can help others show that a business case can be built in the location where they are. This also allows, as with other non-geostationary constellations, for us to be able to tailor our services to smaller communities than we've been able to reach with our larger constellation. As you'll see with our existing constellation, that has spot beams. They're steerable, they can even follow ships, but they are limited in the geographic area that they're able to cover. Very much different with our constellation of 7 satellites that will launch in 2021, which will allow us to service existing segments much better at lower cost, much more flexibly. And also looking to the future, just an emphasis of how much work we and other satellite companies have been putting into integrating satellite into 5G. When it gets there, satellite will be ready, and non-geo constellations will be a significant part of that picture. So to conclude, we're already, as an NGSO constellation, accelerating deployment of 4G. We'll be ready for 5G when it comes. There are significant investments being made. We're just one constellation amongst several that is launching within the next 2 to 3 years. And so you'll see all the benefits that I just described coming online quite shortly. We're a multi-orbit constellation within SES, so that we can offer multiple solutions for the multiple requirements of connectivity that we have today. And we'll help with the access to spectrum, secure and stable, which is very important for us. We'll be able to do as we have done, which is connect remote areas with urban areas so that our infrastructure for communications is truly integrated. And we are really closing the digital divide with the ability to give the same service in very remote areas that is available today in urban areas. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you very much, Susan, for that excellent presentation. I think it sets the scene in terms of issues concerning non-geostationary performance, which I guess when it comes to question time, we'll have a number of people interested in wanting to know more about that. So next we move on, and I would like to invite Fernando, if he's able to take.
Yes, can you hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you.
Excellent. Thank you very much, and I'm sorry for what happened. I think Susan still is sharing her presentation. So yeah, thank you very much. And let me right away put my presentation in the screen. Let me put it in presentation mode. I hope you are all seeing the presentation mode now.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. And again, I'm sorry, apologize. My computer, I had connected in my laptop 2 different screens, and then I think it got crazy with the different audio inputs. So anyway, let me start. This was supposed to be an introductory presentation for the rest of my colleagues to continue, but I mean, please bear with us. So basically, I'm going to talk about the high throughput satellites and why are they different from the regular, and let's say the traditional satellites. So let me start right away. And an HTS normally, it's as any other satellite provides seamless coverage, but it provides immediate, in this case, it can provide immediate broadband access in any area within their coverage zone. It's a very efficient, it makes a very efficient use of the spectrum because it reuses frequencies in a factor of even 100 times of reuse. It's optimized for capacity, not for coverage. I mean, that way we need small beams, what we call point beams to cover all the area we want to cover. We have a multiple gateway architecture. We are definitely we are not a loopback design. I mean, we are not saying we because I'm talking about the HTS. I'm putting my hat of the HTS satellite operators, and this is a presentation of SOAS as it clearly says there. But I work for Hughes Network Systems, which is one of the biggest providers of broadband satellite using HTS satellite. So that's why I'm using a lot the we. So the HTS uses instead of a loopback, a traditional loopback, they use a forward return design, which I will explain in the following slides. And we have gateway user connectivity, not mesh connectivity. User they cannot be connected. We have beam channels up to 750 megahertz. We mostly use Ka band, but we are starting to look up above, and actually satellites are being built using the Q and B bands, and we are also even looking at further away. So we can normally we can with the next generation satellite we will be able to provide user speeds up to 10 megahertz, 100 megabits per second for download speeds. This is a very schematic illustration. While a traditional satellite has very wide coverages and all the coverages, the signal is poured in the whole footprint. In the HTS, we have small beams where they have higher. They are let's say that they can more efficiently manage the power, the RF energy, because it's more concentrated and it can be managed. So another difference is that we have, again, I was mentioning that instead of a loopback configuration, which is basically wherever comes out from a station, it goes down to the satellite and then goes down to the whole coverage, the whole footprint of the satellite, at least in that particular transponder. In an HTS, we don't have transponders, we have channels, and each beam, we have individual beams in which the beams cover certain geographical areas in which the user will have will be able to use a particular channel or channels in that particular user beam. The gateway is basically the center of communications. This is inherently start configuration architecture. There is no mesh communications, meaning that the user beams are not interconnected. One important issue about the frequency reuse is that we can reuse the same frequency with a combination of polarization, with orthogonal polarization, so we can reuse the frequency a number of times. This is a very schematic example of how beams can be constructed. For instance, in the left side, we can see same segments close together, but with different polarization. On the square in the left side, basically we're talking about when we can use now the same frequency, same polarization, but isolated and separated, where a cell it's in between them, a beam is in between them. So that's how we can reuse the frequencies over and over, again in factors of tenfold. What did HTS means in the world? Well, actually, it's a growing market. There are expectations that into 2024, the capacity being managed by HTS satellites will get up to 1.5 terabits per second, which is a lot. So, and this is more or less the distribution of how HTS satellites provide services in the different regions of the world. And you can see in the table in the bottom of the chart, I mean of the slide, that mostly it's using Ka band for currently, particularly, and most of it for broadband access, meaning that we provide internet access directly to the users, to the consumers, to their homes, basically, with the internet access, where of course other options are not available, like fiber optics is not available. So mostly the Ka band. Ku band is used somehow for in HTS satellites. C band not that much, and more frequencies are coming. Like I was mentioning the QMB band in the ranges of 40-50 gigahertz. Satellites are being built for commercial use of these frequency bands, and we are already some companies are already researching and investigating frequencies in the E band, meaning 17-18 gigahertz. Which is very high, but I mean, could be useful for certain applications like gateway communications. Now, let me go to the other part. I mean, I went through the technical part of the HTS. Let me go to the benefits of the satellites in general and for broadband satellites. Well, this is a slide when we can see very in a snapshot what are the uses of HTS. But let me go to a particular service. My colleague from Viasat, I'm pretty sure after me she will go deeper into this. But let me give you an overview of one of the important and one of the most let's say that the applications that reflect mostly the benefits of HTS, which is basically community Wi-Fi. Probably not all households can afford a $50 or $60 bill amount for a particular link, but we have this solution being deployed in many countries in the Americas. And basically, it's basically what we call satellite-enabled community Wi-Fi, in which there is one access point, which basically could be like the store of the store in the village, or like the facility which is commonly accessed by the villagers. And basically, we provide the antenna is only it's installed in this facility, and then via Wi-Fi it's spread out all the around. I mean, basically 80 to 100 meters around the VSAT, and people just come to this vendor and buy time. They buy I don't know, 1 hour of internet access, 2 hours, 3 days, and they pay as small as quantities as small as $50 for instance, for an hour of connection, or even less. So depending on the country, depending on the conditions. So it's very low cost. We have here more extended the picture of the ecosystem, in which where the different parts, like the service platform, the service provider, the service partner, which is basically the one in the country, and the provider of the facility, where the end users, they are going to purchase these data packs to use internet. I'm going a little bit fast because I think I'm running out. I will be running out of time quickly. And let me go through this. I mean, this is important because it shows how the evolving satellite technology, it's allowing to lower the cost per gigabyte. For instance, considering a 6-hour BC period, the wholesale satellite capacity have a cost of $2.31 per gigabyte. So it's considering that the mobile packages are around $8. Well, definitely the retail Wi-Fi service that we are presenting here can be priced and speed competitive, and it's offered anywhere. So many HTS operators that have HTS satellites are deploying this kind of services, community Wi-Fi. We think it's one of the reflections of how satellites are beneficial for the society and for the economy. So my conclusions, well, it's clear that satellites provide, and it was also clear from the other presentations of my colleagues, that provide seamless connectivity within their coverage with the higher resiliency, one of the highest levels of resiliency of all telecommunication systems, because we're not terrestrial based, even though the antennas of the users can be in the ground. A hurricane puts them down, then definitely put in the individual stations, individual user terminals up. It's very easy. So the recovery is extremely fast. And there are a lot of experience, and we've been probably someone else already talked about how we have been satellites have been useful for this kind of situations. So one last important thing, what the provision of satellite broadband is my last point in the conclusions, require that sufficient spectrum is made available. I mean, we cannot operate, HTS satellites cannot operate if they don't have enough spectrum. And that is spectrum which is available for satellite, for FSS. And of course we need efficient regulatory frameworks, because we need we need that the regulations in place allow to foster and to promote these solutions. Thank you very much. Again, my presentation was on behalf of the SOA. These are the SOA members, and with that, I thank you all.
Thank you very much, Fernando, for that presentation. Clearly sets the scene in terms of HTS, and we're looking at the questions that are already coming in. I think there's quite a lot of interest. So we'll move on to the final presentation coming from Ryan. Ryan, you have the floor.
Thank you, Patrick, and good morning, good afternoon, everybody. Let me just share my screen here, if you could bear with me. Of course, it's reset some security things, so now I have to re-allow it. And actually, it's saying I'm going to have to close Zoom. So I don't know, Patrick, is it possible for you to pull up the slide deck that I had sent you? I apologize for that. This is the one thing we didn't test before. Looked like everything else was working. So And Patrick, you're on mute, sorry.
Unfortunately, it requires some a password to sign in. It requires signing in. It was not a deck because it goes to.
Oh, okay. Tell you what, let's.
Does working?
I think it might let me do it now. There we go.
Yeah. Okay.
All right. Don't know why that hiccup happened, but here we go.
Okay.
So I'd like to speak just a little bit, kind of following up on some of the presentations made by my colleagues, and hopefully not covering too much of the same ground. I'll try to move quickly through those areas that have been covered by Fernando and Suzanne and David. For those of you who don't know Viasat very well, we are a 34-year-old company with about 5,200 employees scattered around 29 offices in about 20 countries around the world. We operate today 5 geostationary satellites of our own and operate for several governments, for example, in Brazil and Australia, government-owned satellites. We're primarily focused on connecting people wherever they are. So that could be residential broadband across the US, Canada, Mexico and Brazil, and several European countries, as well as devices on the move. So we connect about 150 million personal electronic devices a year on aircraft. And we've recently spent about $3 billion for our next generation of Viasat 3 class satellites. And I'll talk a little bit more about what those are going to do here in a moment. But one thing we're really proud of is that both Fortune Magazine and Fast Company have recognized Viasat and the community Wi-Fi model that we've pioneered as world-changing ideas. And so we'll get into a little bit more about how we're changing the world with that in a moment. In general, Viasat sees a variety of applications for satellite-powered broadband. And much like SES, we're entirely, or well, O3B, we're entirely using the Ka band to deliver that. It's everything from home internet, business or institutional Wi-Fi, so we cover a lot of universities, government facilities, etc. The community Wi-Fi installations, as well as everything that moves. So airplanes, trains, buses, and boats. As Fernando said, HTS is really where the industry's at today. I think David said it very well. It's not your grandfather's satellite. And I think that's very true. I won't rehash all of this, but the important takeaway is that there's a massive increase in throughput being generated by the satellite industry today. And that's very timely because the demand is increasing. You can see the various types of demand for various satellite functions here. But this red line that's going up quite quickly as we approach 2028 is geostationary high throughput Ka band demand. And the folks at NSR Research think that that's going to be the predominant demand, and fortunately, the supply is catching up to that as well. So by 2028, about 91% of global HTS demand or supply will be in the Ka band. For Viasat, we've got, as I said, a fleet of 5 satellites. The only thing I'll just point out here, rather than go through all of this together, is when our first satellite, Anik F2, was built in 2004, 3 gigabits per second was pretty good. In 2017, we launched Viasat 2 with 260 gigabits a second. And here we are preparing next year, so only 4 years later, to launch something that's about 4x the capacity of Viasat 2. So I think that's very indicative of what's happening across the industry in terms of just the massive increase in capacity. For those Viasat 3 class satellites, these are really at the bleeding edge of what's possible and what's being done by the satellite industry. So these will each be 1 terabit per second satellites. We're building 3 consecutively. The first will cover the Americas, and it'll go up in the first part of next year. And then every 6 months or so, there'll be another satellite coming on behind it. Viasat's the world's first vertically integrated satellite company, and that means we design, develop, build, and operate the satellites ourselves. And that provides some efficiencies, allows us to build the business model around how to get that best throughput. And you can see just sort of in terms of where this technology is going, miniaturization is an important feature. So in the bottom right, you can see the size of the communications panels that run Viasat 1. Well, that little toaster or laptop sized box for Viasat 3 carries the same amount of capacity. So by being able to have the same size satellite bus, and that's a hard constraint for the industry, The miniaturization allows us to get more capacity onto the spacecraft. Likewise for the gateways. You can see going from left, which is a typical older model Ka band gateway, Viasat-1, Viasat-2, and then for Viasat-3, all of the equipment and everything is stored inside the tower upon which the gateway sits. And of course, we're multiplying the number of gateways, which increases the resiliency of the network overall. All of that, all of those innovations that the industry is driving have basically, I think, can be distilled down into two really pertinent numbers. The first one is this, that in a very short period of time, we've had a 500x improvement in capacity. And as a result of that, there's a 400x reduction in the cost of each gigabit per second that you want to provide through satellite connectivity. The result of that is we can really democratize connectivity. We can put down connectivity anywhere. Satellite could always do that. But now that it's at a much more affordable price point, we can do things that were seen as impossible just a few years ago. We're bringing in new services like education, telemedicine, Internet of Things, and precision agriculture tools that would have never been affordable under previous models. And that's enabling us to permanently close digital divides. So where we're at today, we're offering services that are basically comparable both in cost and quality of service with 4G. And by the time Viasat-3 is operational, we're going to be connecting tens of millions of new people across the world, especially in the Americas as well as Africa. We think that our community internet model is an important facet in doing that. So community internet is really about providing high speed, high quality broadband to the users who don't have a lot of internet penetration around them. They may have slow or non-performing internet connectivity, but and they're in places that are difficult to get to, right? Places that haven't been seen as economical for other operators and other technologies. So around the world, there's about 750 million people who have no connectivity whatsoever, but there's another 3.25 billion, give or take, that just kind of fall into this category of people who don't have great connectivity. The internet hasn't transformed their lives in the way that it has for so many other people. And there's a few reasons for that. Poor connections, very high cost, and a lack of content that's in a relevant content for them. So whether that's in the right language for them or stuff that's just pertinent to their lives and is worth investing in. So we've built a platform that integrates our satellite technology and a few other pieces to provide connectivity where those people are. You can see that we're at a much more affordable price point. Around the world, I think Fernando said the average cost of a gigabyte of data is about $8 to the user. Here in Latin America, it's actually a bit higher than that. It's $9.45. And today in Mexico, we're providing a gigabyte of data for under $2. And in Brazil, it's closer to $1.50. And with Viasat-3, we expect to see these prices continue to decline. So how community Wi-Fi works, you can see here in the picture, people go to a local store where they're accustomed to buying all of their goods and sort of their daily interaction. You can see our dishes on the residence attached to the store here. They go in, they visit the retailer, they buy a PIN code, and they turn over cash. Again, these are people who typically don't have electronic banking available to them, so it's all in cash. The retailer collects that cash. They connect to the local Wi-Fi network that we've established, enter their PIN code, and they're online and they're off and going. When we launched this, we realized that many people around the world in that 3.25 billion people population that have poor internet connectivity, they have their own devices and they're going 45 minutes by bus each way to get to where there is connectivity. So it wasn't a question of device, it was a connection of bringing the connectivity to them. We launched that program about 3 years ago, and it's been, I think, quite successful. In Mexico alone, we have 2,500 sites operating today. That's connecting about 1.8 million people who are within walking distance of the Wi-Fi network. And those people, as I said, had poor connectivity or none at all previously. And in Mexico, we define poor connectivity as sort of 2G speeds. So this is a significant increase. They're getting between 10 and 25 megabits per second to the site. And depending on the number of people on the network, they can get most of that to themselves. We launched in Brazil in February of this year, and we're undergoing trials in Jamaica. Throughout this year and next year, we'll be launching in at least 3 countries in Central and South America, and several more in the Caribbean. So this is a program that scales quickly, and you know, has clearly had an impact in people's lives. Just a little bit of background and sort of the economic factors involved here. Our customers are living on between $1 and $5 a day. So the UN Broadband Commission has established 2% of their income as sort of the target. We're working towards that, but this is what, you know, affordable means to them. And right now they're traveling out to get access to all of the services they need, or they're lacking that access. They're used to buying things in small packages, so we provide this on an hourly basis rather than a monthly subscription fee. And they have, of course, as I said, no means of credit or electronic, you know, cash transfers. So it's all a cash-based business. These are very price-sensitive consumers, of course, but the community itself is part of the process for them. So we found that people like sharing their connectivity. They like being in public and being with their friends as they get online and explore all of that together as a community. So that's driven the development of this product for us. In terms of the macro impact, you know, we know that for every 10% increase in broadband connectivity, a country is going to see a bump of about 1.4% in its GDP. And across Latin America, you know, the number of people, or the percentage of people that are unconnected, remains at about 40%, give or take. So this could be a very significant factor for the region. It will reduce the migration from rural to urban communities, increase educational access, and access to government resources. So this will have a huge impact over the coming years in people's lives. And of course, it directly supports several of the UN Sustainable Development Goals. Now I want to pivot kind of sharply in my last minute or so to talk about the eSIM issue and WRC-19. Effectively, WRC-19 evaluated the Ka band, the 17.7 to 19.7 and 27.5 to 29.5 gigahertz for Earth stations in motion, and that's building on a successful decision at WRC-15 for the top 500 gigahertz of the band. Effectively, we found a very successful solution that makes the full Ka band available for geosynchronous eSIMs as part of the FSS. The ITU footnotes there for anybody who wants to go and read the full decision there. But as of July 1st of this year, eSIMs are available to operate in the full 2 gigahertz of Ka band spectrum that was made available by this decision. And it permits full gate-to-gate, peer-to-peer, and ubiquitous terrestrial operations. The resolution 169 at WRC-19 laid out some technical provisions for when you're in a cross-border situation and there's co-frequency line-of-sight communications in the other country that need to be protected. But basically, this is a good starting point, and we've seen a clear emerging trend around the world for eSIMs to be allocated within, or to be enabled within the FSS allocation. And that ranges from CEPT's license exemption to the blanket licensing provided by the US through the FCC, and other countries are looking at making eSIMs available throughout their country. We think that's going to have a huge impact on mobility, in particular as we come back and start rebuilding economies after the coronavirus crisis. And so finally, just looking ahead to WRC 23, you know, these are some of the key issues that we're concerned with, and want to make sure that everybody here is invited to participate and to continue the dialogue on. So certainly inter-satellite links is going to be important for ensuring that we can continue to reap the benefits of the development of all of these new HTS systems, and extending Ka-band eSIMs into the non-GSO field as well, I think is going to be a really important part of the continued development of the industry here. So with that, I'll conclude my remarks. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ryan. It was an excellent presentation. And so now we move into the Q&A session, part of the session. To start off the ball rolling, I'll be asking each of the individual panelists a question. And then after that, we open up to the rest of the audience. So Fernando, to start with you, what do you think regulators and telecommunications authorities in the Americas need or should be promoting satellite-based community Wi-Fi? What should they be doing to promote satellite-based community Wi-Fi deployments?
Thank you, Patrick. That's a good question. I think that, as we mentioned before, there are a number of differences between the traditional satellite service, the traditional satellites with regards to the broadband, to the satellites providing broadband services, the HTA satellites. So, and these characteristics, these technological characteristics needs to be taken into account in the regulatory frameworks. I'm going to give you only one example of this need. As just Ryan mentioned, I mean, one of the particularities of the deployment of broadband satellite services is that they are, by nature, they are ubiquitous. Ubiquitous. It means that they can be deployed anywhere. So, and that's the idea. The idea is to get there to the points where people need the connectivity, and sometimes we find regulations in some countries that requires individual licensing for each terminal, for each user terminal. That's a total a stopper of the deployment of these kind of services. So in these kind of cases, it was also mentioned by Ryan, some countries have implemented what we call blanket licensing, not only for eSIMs, but also for any kind of user terminals which are ubiquitously deployed. So that's one example of the measures that authorities need to consider, among many others, of course. But basically, the general idea is that to take into account that these kind of services, these kind of satellites, in order to be able to be brought to the ones who need it, we have to be a regulatory framework which actually, I'm not saying that to regulate, I'm saying to regulate according to these kind of technologies. That would be my answer. Thank you, Patrick.
Well, thank you so much, Fernando. Now to David, what role do you see satellite communications increasingly playing in the Americas regions?
Thanks, Patrick, for the question. In the Americas region, I think Ryan highlighted one of the challenges with over about 40% of the people in the Americas region, in Latin America, that is, not having affordable access to the internet. I spoke earlier about the technological advances in satellite communications, where maybe 20 years ago, the issue was connectivity. And then in the last 10 years ago, when everyone realized, well, gee, satellite can connect my community, but it's not affordable connectivity. And I think as people have heard, the satellite industry through those technological advances has really addressed both the connectivity and affordability barriers. As I look in the Americas region, the advances that I and my fellow panelists have talked about really enable communities, even in far-flung, very remote rural areas, to connect. And so certainly I see going forward, whether it's 5G or other networks, satellite communications really is the enabler for many of the people listening in on this session who are charged with helping bridge the digital divide, helping bring 5G and other networks to their country. Satellite is a key component. The one thing I would say, and I'm going to echo a message I think Fernando shared, all of this great advances that can bring connectivity that is affordable to the many millions of people in the Americas who currently lack it. All of this requires spectrum. I like to think that spectrum is the same as oxygen is to fire. Fire goes out if it doesn't have oxygen. Satellite communications, or any communications for that matter, fails in its fulfilling its potential if there is not sufficient spectrum. So I think looking forward in time to the Americas region and what satellite communications can bring, as we've heard from myself and the other panelists, all these technological advances are bringing great opportunities to the people in the Americas region. But if sufficient spectrum is not provided, these advances, unfortunately, will be stalled. So that's my answer, Patrick. Thank you. Patrick, I think you're on mute.
Yep. Yes, you are.
Okay. And for Susan, thank you so much, David, for that answer. And then for Susan, how will broader deployment of non-GSOs, non-GSO constellations change satellite services on offer?
So we've heard from multiple speakers about the technology and how it allows us to be much more flexible and much more capable at reaching communities. And so that will just reach another level with, we're already seeing it with our own constellation, what we're able to do within a beam, the communities we're able to reach and connect back to cities. But when this is all electronically programmable, which you saw my colleagues present that technology, we can reach smaller communities and we can adapt the coverage that these communities get over time as they need it, as opposed to having to have a critical mass. We can start there right away with the larger deployment of NGSO systems. We've seen that where we have beams, and we expect to see it more when we have a programmable constellation up in 2021. This also lets us be more efficient with the resources so that we have lower costs, that we're able to deliver these services at lower cost to the end users. We're already seeing that as the geo constellations are being able to deploy to smaller and smaller communities, and that will be amplified when we get to deployment of non-geostationary constellations. But finally, everyone's commented in a different way about how we're closing the digital divide with satellite by being able to reach and being able to connect these communities back with their governments in the capitals, in urban areas, with each other out in the more remote geographies, but also in places, we haven't talked about places in cities that are not covered because fiber doesn't reach everywhere. And the lower latency in those applications that you're able to get with non-geostationary satellites that have lower latency will let these areas in cities and in remote areas see the same kind of performance that they can see in already wherever they're sitting on top of fiber. So that's what I expect. I expect this to be the performance that we've got for the most part on this call. I expect it to be enjoyed by many more citizens of many more countries, just because of the reach of non-geostationary constellations and their ability to add that extra feature of having lower latency.
Thank you so much. And then we'll make last question to Ryan. What are the key trends of eSIM in the Americas that regulators and policymakers should be aware of?
Sure, thanks, Patrick. Yeah, I think, the first thing, as I kind of started to speak about in the presentation is, there's a flexible approach that's emerging, right? So a lot of countries that are adopting this, and I think, we've even seen in draft regulation from countries across Latin America that they're looking at how to enable this as simply an application of FSS, and that's the focus rather than as something different. The important thing here in terms of the market is, for the Americas, is the terrestrial and maritime, I think, are going to be very, very big. Aero's been growing for many years, and I think we've all experienced, the concept of in-flight connectivity, perhaps at different levels of functionality. But for Latin America, I think something like 3 times more people travel by bus than by plane across the region, particularly intercity, but inside the same country. So Argentina, Brazil, Chile, Colombia all have very, very robust bus networks. Mexico as well. Those are going to be internet connected very soon, and satellite really is the only way to do that because the distances between cities remains significant and connectivity quite sparse. Similarly for the Caribbean, I think we're going to see a push into smaller maritime operations, right? So as Viasat and certainly several other companies are working on perfecting small, low-cost, phased array steerable antennas. It's something that can get down into the price point of a couple $100s. Then even fishing vessels that go just beyond the line of sight of shore can take advantage of good broadband in the on the fishing vessel. And so I think, we're going to see just sort of a massification of industry in general. It's an important trend that the countries need to start preparing for.
Okay, thank you, Ryan. So now we go into the open session, and of course, participants will be have been encouraged or have been advised by the organizers that because of the number of participants, it may be difficult to have individual questions. Or the easiest way of having the questions being handled would be through the chat. So I'll go through. We have received some questions already, and so it might be helpful to start by asking some of these questions to the panelists that have been sent across the chat. With the first one, there is one from Santiago Olwin, which he says in the presentation last week, the issue was the sharing of frequency band between the GEO and NGO, the non-geostationary orbit. So that is something which is addressed to, I think, all the panelists that may want to, take a shot at. There is also a question raised by Alexander, who says, taking into account that billions of US dollars have been already invested into the new non-GSO systems, what is the best price of the user at user end? Not corporate, he says, contracts. What sort of price will be paid? Not for contracts, but not for corporate contracts. We also have something which has been raised about NGO, and this is coming from Santiago Salvador, who asks about what do you think about it? Again, that's a general question. There is a question also from an anonymous attendee who says, for Q and V bands in the Caribbean and tropical regions, how do you overcome the high rain-fed, which will be a lot larger than in the lower bands? Could any of the panelists take any of those questions first, and then we can continue?
Patrick, may I?
Yes, please, Fernando.
Yes, very good questions. Let me first address the one by Salvador, who, by the way, I know well from my time in Mexico. The non-GSO GSO sharing of the spectrum is very well defined in the radio regulations. There are certain bands which are subject to EPFD limits, as you all know, in certain bands, in the KU and KA bands particularly. So there is a mechanism already which is Article 22 of the radio regulations, in which non-GSO need to observe certain power limits, EPFD limits, in order for to coexist with the GSO operations. In the bands where these limits doesn't apply, then coordination applies. I mean, regular satellite ITU coordination, in which operators need to sit together and work out the numbers to come to a technical solution and have a coordination agreement. So I'm talking as Hughes. I mean, we have a number of satellites, GSO satellites, and we have coordinated successfully with many NGSO operators that are already operating and will be operating in the future. So I wouldn't see any issue on sharing. Now, if you allow me, Patrick, addressing the question of the vulnerability of the QMB bands in the rain zones, that's totally correct. Normally, we will use the higher bands for gateways, and for gateways we can find particular places within the countries that are dry. Definitely, humid zones are a killer for applications with higher frequencies. They are becoming. We are trying to overcome those limitations, but you're right. The QMB bands most likely won't be able to be used when the rain margins are very high. I mean, when the rain levels are very high, but definitely very good for gateways, which we can find places. For instance, in South America, we have places where we have gateways in higher bands, like in Chile or in Brazil. So we just need to find a place, but definitely probably not now for user terminals in those regions. Probably not now. Thank you.
Any other shot at that by any of the other panelists? Perhaps, okay, there was a question on pricing. Susan, since you are talking a lot about non-GSO, do you want to attempt to say something? The question was about pricing.
So only that you've seen an example of where pricing can go because of the increased availability of satellite capacity in my colleague Ryan Johnson's presentation on Viasat. So there are already solutions for bringing costs really close to what's competitive with, Ryan will tell you better than I, what can be competitive with what's on a local offer from mobile providers. For the non-geostationary constellations, our MEO constellation delivers to our clients, not to end users. So what you've seen in terms of delivery is to governments, as we gave in the example of the COVID crisis, where we already deliver capacity in an area and it's just being expanded by the government. Or we would deliver, let's say, to vessels. And so it's more of a wholesale. So it's harder for us to speak to that. But what I can say is that the capacity prices in general across the industry have come down. As you see more entrants in the non-geostationary space, I would expect that trend to continue simply because you have competition, but also you'll have more availability. So it's harder to speak to it in a space where we have more new entrants who are preparing to provide service than already provide service. And we ourselves are a wholesale. But the trends are definitely going in the right direction for end users.
Okay. I'll follow on with a couple of other questions which have been sent to us again. One is about, which says, how can we achieve cheaper satellite internet services and to make those competitive? I guess it has been answered to a way by Ryan, talking about the trends, but if there's something more that could be added, that we welcome. There's also a question about the current situation of COVID-19. Will it slow your implementation plans, dates of entry into service, or response of end users to purchase new GSO or non-GSO services? So again, here, any of the panelists could talk about their implementation plans, how they're being affected by COVID-19.
Patrick, if I may take that question about the impact of COVID-19 from an industry perspective. Yes. Certainly, like all industries, it's had an impact. Certain customer segments, such as airlines and cruise lines, have been gravely impacted, as I think we're all familiar with, and that has had a knock-on effect on the services that the satellite industry provides to airlines as well as cruise ships. By the same token, we've seen an impact, positive, if you will, which is that as increasingly people are working from home, as people are educating from home, and the needs for telemedicine have increased as a result of the pandemic, we're seeing greater and greater reliance on satellite communications and the unique affordability as well as connectivity that satellite communications has provided. In terms of long-term impacts, I think we all believe that the airline and cruise line industries will bounce back. I think overall people have grown more dependent on connectivity, have seen greater applications that they can use their connectivity. So I do think when the world comes back, and hopefully in the not too distant future, there will be increased focus on connecting the unconnected, providing more capacity, and providing it in an affordable way. And as we've heard from myself and the other panelists, the satellite industry is well positioned to provide that affordable connectivity. So I think short-term issues, certainly for the satellite industry associated with the pandemic, but long-term, I think the industry is well positioned to take advantage of the lessons we're all learning and the need for increased affordable connectivity. So that's my sense. Thank you, Patrick.
Okay, thank you. There is a general question which relates to engagement between the regulators, between satellite companies and the regulators, and I guess here the question would be to maybe the other way around, to say, the panelists, is there something that you see that in terms of engagement that ought to be done by the regulators specifically in order to address a number of these issues? Any additional sort of comment on, for example, Susan, what do you is there something that you think that should be done to improve engagement with regulators?
To improve engagement with regulators, it is this kind of forum is very helpful for us actually, because we are able to reach so many more regulators without travel. One of the things that Fernando mentioned, he mentioned that in order to be able to deploy these kinds of services to many more people, we expect to have many more satellite antennas in country, but there's not a regulation in most countries that allows you to license multiple antennas at a time. For us to have this forum, to be able to explain very concretely what kind of service we provide, and then where on the government side we don't have a vehicle for making that happen, it's very, very useful. So I'm very much looking forward to the Spanish language version of this forum in the fall. And I hope that regulators can access it and ask us directly, you know, what have we seen in terms of an effective regime? And we would certainly be encouraging governments to share their experience and how it has worked and how they have been able to minimize their own workload in trying to license and enable multiple terminals. That is going to be a big challenge for terminals that stay in one place and for terminals that move, for us to be able to get them in country so that people have access and can use the service.
Okay. There is a question which I think I should specifically address to Ryan, and this is from Kim, who says that, is there any option for small-scale fishers at sea who only have mobile phones and cannot afford subscription?
Well, the short answer is that today, no, right? I don't know that any of the operators are offering that for today. I would expect that several of us are looking at that problem and trying to figure out how we address that market, because you know, much as we found with community Wi-Fi, the demand was there and people were willing to make those purchases. And I think we would see that, you know, when we can provide better fishing information, better market data to fishermen. Certainly I recall back in 2012 or so, CTU helped foster an application for over 3G networks for fishermen that were near shore. And so I think there's a good model there, a good case history of what can be done. The question is, how do we work to bring the price point down to provide that service a little bit farther away from the shore? Certainly we're looking at that problem, but don't have a product on the market today.
Okay, thank you. Does any other operator want to respond to that?
Yeah, may I, Patrick?
Yes, Fernando.
Yes, I mean, that totally agree with Ryan. I mean, even though some operators can have coverage, and actually even not only in the shores, but I mean, very well inside the open seas. The issue for bring affordable connectivity is that for instance, this model of Wi-Fi, community Wi-Fi, we require a fixed point. So we can bring the signal to that point, and then we can distribute that in an affordable way to people who are connected, who are close to this point of arrival point where the signal from that is coming. That then can be replicable at sea or even near the shore. I mean, the reach of Wi-Fi cell in these cases are no more than 100 meters. So definitely not a solution. So I agree with Ryan that right now we at least, and I don't even think that non-GSO operators can offer an affordable way of connectivity. Of service we can have, of course, but I mean an affordable way like this type of for this particular case for fishermen, I think we are still working on that, but not really having a solution to offer right now.
Okay. Okay, thank you. I don't know if there's any other question, but that sort of was the general sort of sense of the question we're having from the audience.
Patrick?
Yes.
So, Nigel, there is one general, I guess it's a little vaguely worded, what's the relationship between satellites in orbit and non-GSO? I think the sense of what was being asked there might have been how what are we doing so that they can effectively coexist? Because you already have satellites up there, and there are these great plans to have multiple non-GSO satellite constellations going. I think the questioner, this is Melissa, who I think is from Jamaica, is probably trying to find out how do we make them coexist and without one set of operators interfering with another.
Maybe before we get an answer from that, maybe we could specifically ask Susan, for example, who talked of research being undertaken to have interconnection between the GEOs and GSOs. Is there something that you could add more on that in terms of actual realities?
That's being studied for WRC 23 to make sure that you can have applications. For example, you have small satellites gathering data as they take pictures of the Earth, as they gather atmospheric information from the Earth, and it needs to, rather than having them go all the way around the world to drop the data back down to where it's needed, they could send it over satellites to have it come down much more often or pick up data much more often. So that's the kind of application that would be assisted by having very clear regulations for communications between satellites in the fixed satellite service frequencies. With respect to how the many NGSO satellites and constellations will avoid interfering with one another, there are already established regimes. I think Fernando mentioned it as well. There are already existing regimes for coexistence between non-geostationary and geostationary satellites in multiple bands. We studied that in the last cycle in the QV bands. But with respect to the number of constellations that will be coming online, we start with NGSO and GSO. Both types of constellations have highly directional antennas, so they can point to the satellite that's wanted. It does get much more complicated as you have many, many more satellites. And there are ongoing proceedings, for example, in the US, where there's a processing round. And so some of those are very live issues there. But it is being worked through that particular process where you have a large number of constellations talking about that, how that will happen. Much of it actually will happen as part of the ITU process. There will be coordination, as there are between geostationary satellites, and those can be worked out as between constellations, operator to operator. So that is ongoing for my constellation, which has been in operation for quite some time. And so we're certainly engaged in talking with other non-geostationary operators and for the other operators amongst themselves. It is an ongoing process as between operators under ITU auspices.
Well, thank you very much for that very excellent presentation. Perhaps we can do a final round of 1 minute to each panelist, a parting word that you want to say to the audience, starting with you, David.
Patrick, and again, thanks to the ITU and CTU for the opportunity to address this very large, close to 200 people, and very important group of stakeholders in the communications world. I think I would just conclude by re-emphasizing a couple of points. That the satellite industry is very much different from what it was 10, 15, and certainly 20 years ago, in that whether you're talking about GEO, MEO, or the LEOs that are coming on board, you're talking about greatly increased connectivity, greatly increased capacity, and greatly reduced pricing. And with those trends really accelerating over the last few years. And that provides satellite communications with great opportunity to meet a lot of the regulatory objectives for people who are participating in this conference. And I would just ask that if there are questions, whether it's through formal consultations or informal discussions with operators or other stakeholders, please reach out to the satellite industry. We realize that the workload is very heavy for regulators, but there is opportunity to learn about what satellite communications can provide and how it can successfully address a lot of the regulatory objectives that you all have. Thank you.
Thank you, David. And on to Fernando.
Yes, thank you very much, Patrick. Well, first of all, thanks a lot for the invitation. I think the opportunity for SOA to be represented here is very important. As David mentioned, I mean, SOA is also an association, an industrial association of satellite operators. And we, as an industry, we believe that we are, I mean, many things are decided at the ITU level in the radar regulations and in the World Radar Conferences and a lot, but we are very into the hands of local regulators. I mean, when we come to a country to provide service, we need, and actually sometimes even the decision of a satellite, how the coverage will be designed, what countries will be included in the coverage, it's based on how the regulatory framework of that country it allows or doesn't allow number one, the use of certain frequency bands or the frequency band that we need for those satellites to operate, and two, for the regulatory regimes if they allow the provision of these kind of services. So even from before the decision to take the decision of what is the coverage of the satellite, we make an analysis of the situation in each country, and we are very into the hands of the regulators and the ministries around the world. We need them to help us to help the people to connect. So that's again my ask. I mean, even though we have spectrum allocated in the ITU level, definitely we need a spectrum available in the countries, and of course also regulatory frameworks that are that move accordingly to the nature of these new services. Thank you, Patrick, and thank you.
Thank you, Fernando. And Susan?
Yes, hi. I certainly second what both David and Fernando has said, and I would encourage the regulators to use us to be in touch with David Meltzer, who can act as a conduit for any questions you have of us and let us know what the gaps are. It sounds like from what we were saying that the interest for regulators is very much in affordability and very much in what we're able to do. And certainly David has his pulse on all the members in this region. The fact that SOA is here and makes sure that we've got the broadest possible representation of satellite operators, so you have a reach into our knowledge base. And from you, we'd certainly want to know how your resources are challenged by what we're trying to do, so that we can sort of brainstorm solutions for making that easy. We offer one suggestion today, which is, we need blanket licensing to make sure that you can easily access our services. But we know that may present specific challenges for each country. Again, we offer the leaders of our regional organizations, GVF, David Meltzer, and ESOA, any one of us can put you in touch with him to ask these questions and to figure out if we can't have specific forums dedicated to your most challenging issues. I very much thank ITU and the CTU for organizing this forum to allow us to be able to present to you directly. It's been very helpful for us.
Thank you, Susan. And last word from Ryan.
Thank you, Patrick. And I'll echo some of the comments from my colleagues, maybe making three general points. One is we're in the middle of a revolution in the technology and the business models behind satellite. And what that requires, I think, is similarly a bit of a revolution in the regulatory perspectives to break free of some of the ways we were doing things before and to look at what's available and what the market and consumers need now. The second point is that if we do that, consumers are going to benefit from that compound revolution. And third, we value the opportunity to come to forums like this to discuss issues with the regulators, but also bilaterally. Certainly, I think I can speak for all of us when we say we always welcome questions or comments, no matter how off the wall they might seem. There's certainly nothing that we wouldn't want to talk through and discuss and figure out the way forward. So with that, I'll just once again thank the ITU and CTU for organizing this event and say thank you.
Thank you very much. On behalf of the panelists, I would like to say thank you very much to all the colleagues and participants to this seminar. I think it would be very unfair if I attempted to summarize on behalf of all those, of the colleagues for the excellent work they have done. But certainly as an insight into the satellite systems, I think the work that has been covered with regard to the eSIMs first, and then the high throughput satellites and non-GSOs and so on, I think it opens ground for discussion way beyond what we might have anticipated before we started this discussion. There's a lot of information that's available in the presentations, which are of course on the website or will be on the website. I would like to encourage each and every one of you to make time to read through that and be able to discuss what subsequent discussions that may come out of these presentations. It looks very rosy from what they have all said in terms of the satellite, what is coming in the future. But in having taken that, I think it then becomes your duty to see whether what they have all presented today meets what your expectations are, whether you are a policymaker, a regulator, or any other industry stakeholder. So thank you all very much for attending. I want to wish you a very nice rest of the day, and we'll hand the floor back to ITU. Of course, very much thanking the organizers, ITU and CTU, for the excellent work that has been done and the opportunity to bring everybody together. Thank you very much, and bye.
Thank you very much, Patrick, and to all the panelists. I think it's been very, very edifying, and we've taken, certainly we've noted the challenges to our regulators in the region, and CTU will continue to work with our members to advance connectivity and services at an affordable rate to all our constituents. So that brings us to the end of our program for today. I invite you to join us again tomorrow when we get into another two panels discussions of the forum. We begin at 9 a.m. Eastern Caribbean time. That's in the UTC-4 time zone with emergency communications. And after the break, we'll be looking at transport systems like aeronautical, maritime, and so on. So you're invited to come back. I'm sure the panels tomorrow will be as interesting and informative. So please join us then. Thank you, and bye for today. Thank you.
Thank you.